Okay, thank you. This is the City Council of the City of Escalon, regular.
Councilmember Legero. Here. Mayor Pro Tem Alves.
Here.
Mayor Swift.
Here. We will proceed right to the consent calendar. These items are considered routine in nature and are acted upon by a single action unless requested by an individual council member or member of the public for special consideration. For example, regarding item number 2, I will be abstaining from check number 9700. And that is, I'll be abstaining from voting on it.
I would move on staff's recommendation.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to pass the consent calendar in its entirety, with the one exception. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Motion passes 5-0. Staff communications.
I have none tonight.
Really?
Yeah.
I guess I'm the only one talking tonight. I have three items. The first item I have is regarding business license. As of this morning, we had 33 businesses located in town, most of them with some type of storefront that have not paid their business licenses. We are extending it out. They had about a 2-week period where we let it kind of sit for a while because we were catching up on some paperwork. But we are going to put out a final notice tomorrow, giving them an additional 7 days to pay, or we move forward with administrative citations.
Did I hear you right? You said there's 33 in town that haven't paid?
That have not
And they're
renewed.
storefronts?
Majority of them are storefronts, yes.
Interesting.
So I just wanted to let you know, in case anybody gets any calls, that's what we're doing. So then we would have our due date of next Tuesday, and then citations would follow on the next Wednesday. The next item is just a reminder that the Planning Commission's meeting is next week, Tuesday, 7 p.m., which is March 10th. We have 2 items on that agenda. An item that did come up at our last Planning Commission, which staff had asked the Planning Commission, was that if they would be interested in moving the meeting time earlier from the 7 p.m. Everybody agreed that 6 p.m. would be too early, but they thought that 6:30, they would be okay with it if council consented to it. That is the same time that our Recreation Committee meets, or commission. So we were wondering if council would be interested in that, because that is something that would need to change by ordinance.
For the Planning Commission.
For the Planning Commission to move from 7 p.m. to 6:30 p.m.
Okay, is there any issue with that?
No.
No? Do we have consensus to have Planning Commission meetings at 6:30?
How's the council, the planning commission feel about it? They got consensus there?
I did, yes. We did get consensus from them,
Okay.
yeah. And they were fine with it, so long as council was fine with it. But if council wasn't fine with it, they were fine with leaving it at 7.
I would assume nobody's hollering, so I think we're okay.
Yeah, we just figured at least, and they brought it up, the Recreation Commission is at that 6:30 time too, so at least they'd
Sure.
match and would be kind of more consistent.
Mhm.
Okay,
Okay.
I'll bring an ordinance forward in the next few weeks. Thank you.
Is that it?
That's it.
I have one quick question.
Sure.
Progress on the Lear development. I've been asked again and again regarding the Coley for parking for the public,
Yes.
and if those fences have been moved.
You were able to drive by? Have they been moved?
I have not.
Okay. We did talk to Mr. Lear last week, and then required that the fencing and the civil improvements and the encroachment permit for all those improvements be closed out by March 4th. So far, it sounds like he'll be moving forward with that. He did have a contractor not be able to make his job last week, but it sounds like everything's gonna be moving forward for that March 4th date. Currently, back in October, the storage building that was the original approval of the project through the Planning Commission and City Council, there are 8 units, and then the 9th was the commercial unit, and then he was going to have a separate storage building that would have storage areas, secured storage for each of the units, and then the remainder be for the commercial building. In going through the process with establishing the HOA, he was finding that storage building infeasible because it was driving up the costs of the HOA, therefore was becoming a detriment to the project. He didn't want to have to come back to Planning Commission and Council to have that portion of the project changed. So we discussed with him an alternative for storage. The alternative ended up coming down to attic storage needing to be provided. So he confirmed back in October that he would do the attic storage, and then it came up in the last few weeks that he was having difficulty getting attic storage in all of the units. He has updated us that he's worked something out, that he should be able to address that issue. So we're currently waiting on the dimensions and information for the site plan on how the attic storage would be maintained, so we'll have a good idea on that. And then,
What's the required square footage storage for each unit?
per municipal code, it's about 40 square feet. It's like 8 by 5 by 6, something like
So it's
that.
doable.
Yeah, it's a smaller area. He was actually, I mean, the storage building he was proposing was giving them more storage than what was required. But the HOA fees, which he's trying to keep reasonable with the size of the projects, which are defined as townhomes, it was driving the HOA fee into the 300s a month for those units. So he's looking for an alternative, and we're trying to meet him there.
His plan was to put it in this attic, right?
What's planned now is to put some storage area in the attic, and then we had asked him to hold off on on that storage building for now and get all the units completed, and then he could come back to council to figure out what to do with that storage building after the project's done.
By
And he's
putting
about 90% complete with
Mayor,
everything.
Mayor, if I may, I just want to make sure we don't go too far into discussions on a topic that's not on an agenda.
Oh, I know. It's just mainly, this is informational, but, it's been something that we've been asked about, and so we're doing due diligence to ask, so, that's
I
all. But I
understand.
very duly noted. Thank you, though. Thank you, though. Okay, sounds good. It's March 4th.
March 4th.
Okay,
He should be out of the street.
okay. Matters present from the audience. At this time, the public may address the city council on any item not on the agenda that is within the authority of the council. The speaker is limited to 5 minutes per item, and I would please ask that you do so. And Chief, if you wouldn't mind just keeping track rather loosely as we normally do, but still we'd like to maintain some semblance of order in here. And is there anybody who would like to speak on any matter presented from the audience, any non-agendized item?
Non-agendized. Gary Haskin, 471 Cabernet Court. Sidewalks, Dent School. A few years back, we had the Safe Routes to School, and we were getting sidewalks in that area. Still at the corner of Brayton and Yosemite, there's still no sidewalks. I get my grandson, we gotta walk on the grass, gutter or street, and that's one of the few places that still need it. So I'm hoping we can go back, and hopefully there's still money in that fund or some other fund, because it's kind of dangerous when school starts, and especially when it gets out.
I know at the time when we did that project, we weren't able to get property owner permission, so.
Yeah,
We'll
I
have to
realize
revisit
that was a hang up, but I had the feeling that's one of those things that we can't do it now, but we'll get it later, and there's always a lot of stuff between now and later.
Yep.
So if we could look at that again, please, see if we get that taken care of, appreciate it. So would all the little kids.
All right, thank you. Anybody else like to speak under matters presented from the audience? Then if not, we will go to a public hearing. Public hearing to consider the following, item number 3. And I'm gonna make, 50-50 chance I'm gonna be right.
Look at your,
What?
no, on the screen.
Oh. There's the answer. Dominique.
Thank you. So this item is an introduction and waiving of the first reading of ordinance number XXX, which amends multiple sections of the Escalon Municipal Code regarding permitted uses and definitions related to alcoholic beverage uses. During the last year or so, city staff has had multiple inquiries regarding opening up tasting rooms, breweries, microbreweries, et cetera, in Escalon. Since these types of businesses are popular in the larger surrounding cities, city staff is proposing to add these types of uses to the city's list of permitted uses and uses permitted by conditional use permit by zoning district. This will not only assist staff with advising whether these uses are permitted and what areas of town they can be located in, it will also provide staff with information on how persons can go about obtaining an approval for that specific use. City staff is also proposing that all use types added to the municipal code require A conditional use permit application if desired in the C2 zoning district, which is community commercial, which is primarily located along McHenry Avenue, Highway 120, Main Street, and some other additional streets in the downtown area. These use types would be permitted in the M1 and M2 zoning districts, which are the industrial districts in town. All developments are still required to obtain site plan approvals and/or building permit approvals. Each type of business added to the list of uses is required to have a permit from the California Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control, ABC, to operate legally. City staff has prepared a definition for each use type, which includes the type of licenses required through ABC. Another item staff proposed by staff, staff has proposed is allowing that uses classified as contracting businesses be permitted to operate in the C2 zoning district with approval by the city staff or the city planner if their business activities remain enclosed within the building occupied. This amendment allows contracting businesses the ability to locate their business or office into available suites or units in the city without the requirement of a conditional use permit. Currently, the city requires a conditional use permit for any type of contracting business in the C2. The city would continue to require conditional use permits for all other contracting businesses that are either developing new or acquiring a space needing additional development or a site plan review. These proposed amendments were presented and discussed with the Planning Commission at their January meeting, in which the commission unanimously approved a recommendation to the City Council for their adoption. An additional amendment discussed with the Planning Commission was amending the use type equipment, vehicle, light, heavy, truck, or trailer rental by requiring that these types of businesses have direct access onto a street identified in the city's municipal code as a designated truck route. Businesses whose primary operation is rental of vehicles or equipment or trailers are anticipated to generate increased commercial truck trips for both pickup and drop-off of such items throughout the day, more than average and possibly before or after normal business hours. The increased commercial truck traffic has a larger impact to the city's roads, both in maintenance and congestion, as many streets throughout town are not equipped for continuous commercial truck traffic, which is more than trucks making an occasional scheduled delivery to our local businesses. The requirement to be located on a street designated as a truck route also lessens the burden to the surrounding residents and/or businesses currently operating in the vicinity whose businesses may be negatively impacted by the impacts or effects of continuous or inappropriate truck activities in the area, especially if not operating a similar type of business. The Planning Commission preferred to address these issues and concerns of city staff during the CUP process or conditional use process, and therefore did not include this specific amendment in their recommendation to City Council. However, staff does feel that potential businesses researching municipal code requirements before selecting a location for these types of businesses would benefit from the advanced knowledge that these use types need direct access to truck routes. And if you have any questions, we did provide two types of the ordinance, the draft that has everything in red that would be added. The definitions for the alcoholic beverage uses are to help both staff and applicants. A lot of people that have come in interested in those type of businesses don't necessarily have the background or haven't done it before, so they're unsure really what would be required from ABC as well. So we actually took those definitions straight out of ABC so that we could advise them what type license they needed and what's related to that. We currently have nothing in the code regarding those types of business related to alcohol beverages. But because there's so much activity with that in other towns, we thought at least if we have it in the book, we have something to go off of instead of just saying no. So we'd like to see those added in there if possible.
Dominique, to that point, and a quick question to segue off of where you got the ABC
Sure.
information at, the actual text, where were you able to get the text from? I mean, I'm gonna assume it was hopefully taken from some other communities that do have an existing,
For the definitions?
yes. Well, not
Uh,
just definitions, but the actual text of the entire ordinance.
We did review multiple cities.
Okay.
We tended to go towards the smaller ones
Mhm.
than the larger because we don't want it to be so, a lot of them have huge processes, and we just wanted it to be where at least it's in the book,
Mhm.
and we can go through that process. And then later on, if we do start moving forward with those types of businesses, and we see something that needs to be changed or updated or
Sure.
accommodated to, we could go through.
Sure.
Or if we get an abundance of them, we can create what we've seen, either a separate ordinance for that use in general, or some type of district.
Okay, all right, thank you.
What's a good footprint?
You had a little more? I believe I interrupted you.
Oh, no, I'm fine.
Oh, are you finished?
No, that's the item. I was just going through the red lines.
Mhm.
So everything in red obviously is new. And then the ordinance itself has the clean version, where everything
Okay.
that was presented is now in black as the updated ordinance.
Okay.
So right now, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, go
Wanna
ahead.
open it
Go
in?
ahead, sure.
Yeah. No, go ahead. Actually, I'm gonna ask for
I
any
just-
opening thoughts before I open up the public hearing, so go ahead, please.
Well, just a thought, so right now, if somebody wants to open a microbrewery in town, there's nothing on the books for that at all?
We don't have any definition for it. We don't have what type of business it is.
So could they do it, or they just couldn't open one in town? Because it's not in our,
We have, yeah, I mean, I think at that point is when we would move forward, and that's why we're taking that as a signal. We've had more than one person asked, especially in the last 6 months, especially because other businesses are moving forward with dividing into suites and stuff, and people are looking for storefronts. We're getting a lot of the, wine tasting or tasting rooms.
those wouldn't fall under a restaurant or a food
You fall under a
establishment?
restaurant if you have food. We try to interpret it to help it fit, but something specialized with alcohol, it's better to have it specifically in your ordinance that way. So, I mean, we would try to find a way to fit it in the meanwhile, but because we're getting so much information on it, we want to put that in the
So
code.
basically now, this will allow people that wanna open up a business like that to have something on our books that they can now come in and get the conditional use permit.
Yeah, and go through the process, yes.
It's a more clarified.
Yeah.
It's further clarified. Right now, there's a lot of ambiguity with where they can go, how they can operate. And most of the ones we've had, with the exception of maybe 2, have never been in that. They've worked for a winery, or they, like to make things on the side, but they're opening it up to the public, which of course changes the
So
requirements.
this is
and-
cleaning it up for the way for people that wanna do that particular
Yeah, it's
type.
given us a starting point so that we
Yeah.
can move forward with something
This
instead
will
of
help
having
those
to.
businesses because-
Definitely.
no, okay.
I definitely agree with that. At least we could provide them some type of avenue to go down, a process, give them information on what would be needed, identify whether they're wanting to build new on a vacant lot, or if they're wanting to move into a suite, if they are leasing, having to clear it with the property owner, those type of items that would fall more under conditional use, instead of saying, well, we're gonna have to look into this a little further. Let us
Sure,
get back to you.
Sure, okay,
So-
very good. I'd like to open up the public meeting. Any questions from the public or comments from the public, please come forward at this time. Not everybody at once? Okay, we'll declare the public meeting, the public hearing closed, and we will bring it back to council for action.
Move on staff's recommendation?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded on staff's recommendation to introduce and waive, excuse me?
There was the one other item in the staff report, the additional,
We had 2. We had the one regarding the contracting business. That
Mhm.
was something we pulled out separately. And then the other item was regarding the
designated to be access to the truck routes.
truck routes on equipment rental, or vehicle or equipment rental. Did anybody have any questions on those?
Can you elaborate a bit on that truck route thing?
So the city recently updated our truck routes, say about 2 years ago. Originally, just about we had a ton of streets in town designated as truck routes, and we narrowed those down to McHenry Avenue, Escalon, Belota, and then also the Highway 120 going through town, so it'd be Yosemite, Jackson. We did have a business come forward in the last few months that was looking to locate over off of 120, and the type of business they were interested in doing was equipment rental. They had a couple other issues they would have needed to work out on the property they were looking at moving into, but it was something that came to our attention in having that type of business. where you're renting out heavy-duty equipment, and having bigger trucks or commercial-grade trucks pick up and drop off numerous times during the day, that the best option at that point would be to have direct access onto a truck route as opposed to being locked up in a residential neighborhood or needing to go through a regular road to do that if it's going to be excessive. So staff had discussed that and our concerns about it, and we had brought it forth to the planning commission, because we do feel that since we've updated the truck routes, that we should probably be moving forward with applying that to specific uses that support why we removed the truck route from those streets and designated it on those routes, and that those types of businesses should have that direct access so that it doesn't affect our residential or non-truck route or non-designated truck route streets
Okay.
with that type of traffic
You said
or
they're on
congestion.
120 though, that is a truck route, right?
Highway 120,
That particular business was,
yeah, they were looking on that, but it came to our attention that that type of business can go in a lot of different places in town. And if didn't have direct access, they would be utilizing other streets to do pickup and drop off.
There's no problem with that business.
no.
I'm- no.
No, that business, yeah.
No, they
What we're
ended up,
voting on doesn't affect them.
no.
No.
But I do want to clarify, though, that,
Sure.
for example, Main Street, and I'm reading this line in the text, not equipped for continuous commercial truck traffic, which is more than trucks making occasional scheduled deliveries to our local businesses.
Yes.
That would therefore put Main Street in play as well.
Yeah,
as a
Main
potential
Street is not a
location for
truck
that.
route. So if you were to locate a business onto Main Street
Mm-hmm.
and they wanted to rent out equipment, heavy-duty equipment that required commercial trucks to pick up and drop off constantly, that could really affect all the businesses in town blocking the streets because there's nowhere for them to pull off of.
Right.
And if they're picking up 5 or 6 pieces of equipment daily,
That's
it could be an
constant.
issue.
Okay, versus
If-
occasional.
Yeah, versus occasional or an area that has that direct access to where they pull off and then they pull straight onto the truck route where they're supposed to be driving. Deliveries are one thing because they're scheduled, they're routine, but if you're doing things,
I mean, I would imagine
Constant.
your typical, like, small microbrewery, like a couple of ones in Oakdale or Tap Dabble in Ceres, you might have one truck a week possibly coming in. And that's it, for either delivering or taking stuff out of there. And I would assume that therefore that qualifies under your definition of occasional.
yes, occasional
okay.
delivery, which is allowed in all
Sure.
areas,
Okay.
yeah.
So
Okay.
like if a business opens on Main Street in a restaurant, and they need their food distributor to bring the food in a big.
Yeah, that's
semi,
all delivery.
That's fine.
It's when it becomes more excessive where it goes with that use.
Yeah, where it's more a part of the business's regular,
Trucking,
their daily schedule.
Yeah.
okay.
So they'll have multiple, if they're renting out tons of equipment and they have somebody picking it up and dropping it off, that's all they're doing is picking up and dropping off. You
Okay.
can have them repeatedly come back and forth.
So that's the trucking issue.
Yeah.
Let me backtrack a little bit. Councilmember Crumick,
Yeah.
does that change your motion at all?
Well, should it be two, if we're voting on two different things?
I think we're voting on one. It's just these are different items that,
So
You can-
it would be voting on the way the ordinance is presented and potentially adding in the additional amendment regarding the trucks.
okay, so as of right now, it sounds like the way that, what you have said, it would include adding in the trucks.
Yes, and that.
But if you want to, everything is open to editing.
Okay.
So if the council has something different or they want to update the language to say something differently, you can pose that and as long as everybody's in agreeance with that, we can change the
And
ordinance.
just again, the amendment for the trucking issue is that they have to be on those truck routes essentially, right?
Those type of businesses would need direct access to a truck
Who
route,
are already defined.
truck routes,
Okay.
yeah.
So
I'm-
are you okay with that?
I'm okay with that. I have no question.
Councilmember Legero, you made the second. Are you okay with that?
I am.
Okay. Again, so we still have a current motion on the table, and by the way, I think once you finish talking about the trucking issue, and I think there's one more related issue, if you don't mind, I'd like to go over and reopen the public hearing, just to make sure that everybody's on the same page. Mayor Pro Tem Alves, you had a question?
I have a question. What I'm not clear on is on the truck routes that are allowed to come into the downtown, are they allowed access to Main Street? Or do they come off 120 and into the alley? Are they allowed on Main Street, period?
They're allowed on Main Street for deliveries.
Why would they come off Main Street instead of the 120 and then come in the back way through the alleys rather than going down Main Street? Are they gonna deliver from the front of the stores on Main Street? Is that the idea?
Oh, they're probably,
Trying to
It's not
visualize.
really determined. I think it would be,
Yeah.
it's based on the delivery person. I would agree with you that most of them would probably deliver from the rear,
Yeah,
but
because it becomes quite an obstruction when they're on the main part of
Correct.
Main Street.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no way to get around them.
I think the spirit of what you're saying is, let's say you have like a small little, a little restaurant, like a brewery restaurant, or something like that on Main Street that will, maybe once a week, maybe we'll get a delivery to, versus, let's say something, let's say you have a St. Stan's outlet or something like that on 120 that you might be making daily deliveries to. That one you may want to have on the major truck route, for example.
If they have excessive
Yeah,
deliveries like that, then
Yeah.
yes. But
Okay.
this one is specific to types of equipment, because we know that those types of equipment, whether
Require
for
delivery.
vehicles and
Sure.
heavy machinery and stuff, that the person that we had worked with, I mean, that was ideally what they were having, was enormous equipment that couldn't be picked up and dropped off on its own. It had to be
Sure.
towed, and so they would bring in massive commercial trucks to be able to move
Okay.
that stuff in and out.
so we're okay with the trucking amendment. You had another one.
The other one was regarding contractor offices or contractor businesses. Currently, any type of contracting business, which I guess could be like your business with landscaping, or if a contractor has a construction business and they want to move into the C2, even if the requirement is approval of a conditional use permit, no matter where they're being located in. The main thing that staff is concerned with those types of businesses is where are they storing anything that's outdoors? So if they're moving into a suite and they just want an office, and they're gonna be handling an office, and they're able to maintain whatever type of stuff they have for their business inside the building, we feel that a use permit at that point would be a little excessive, because they're all located indoors or enclosed indoors. Whereas if they're creating their own facility and need to go through the site plan, construct a building and have an area for storage, or if they're moving into an area that's already constructed and it has an area, an outdoor area that they want to utilize for their business, that should go through
Planning Commission.
conditional use
Good.
permits
Sure.
and be reviewed. Whereas if they're just moving into that building and everything's indoors, it should be easier for them.
Okay.
And that's staff's recommendation.
Okay, Councilmember Cormac, do you have any issue with that?
I do not. I'm good with that. I'm good with the trucking thing.
Okay, and Councilmember Legero, you made the second. Do you have any issue with that?
And just one question, these changes don't affect any of the existing businesses in town, correct?
No?
This is all for future.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so it has been moved and seconded to introduce and waive the first reading, amending section 17 dash .11, dash .040, 17.81.020, 17.81.030, and all the other and sundry ordinances of the Escalon Municipal Code regarding permitted uses and definitions related to alcohol beverages uses. And if you don't mind, I'd like to go ahead and reopen the public meeting in light of the openly talking about these two possible additions. And if anybody would like to come up, there's their chance. If you have any questions, concerns? Going once, going twice. We'll close the public hearing. Is there any further discussion on the motion on the table before we proceed to vote? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Motion passes 5-0.
This item will also be on the next agenda for the second reading and adoption, so you'll see it again.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Administrative matters, item number 4, and this might be Tammy.
it is. At our meeting of October 7th, the council approved the release of our request for proposal regarding infrastructure modernization and utility savings program. Utilizing the RFP process, the city sought to select a qualified provider for the development, implementation, and monitoring of a comprehensive infrastructure modernization and utility savings program. The city would intend to implement a design-build program consistent with provisions of the California Government Code sections 4217.10 and 4217.18, that will provide sustained efficiencies and energy cost savings. The ultimate goal is to utilize financial savings realized from efficient facilities and infrastructure towards other upgrades and programs that enhance the working environment and improve livability. The provider will support the city's goals by developing, implementing, and monitoring an infrastructure modernization and utility savings program. Some of the potential projects are heating and ventilation and air conditioning, HVAC systems, retro upgrade or replacement at our police station and library, sewer and storm system improvements, including lift station pumps and controls, pipe system monitoring technology, LED lighting systems for buildings, parks, well security lighting and street lights, water well modernization and security, battery energy storage, advanced meter reading, water meter upgrades citywide, solar and other renewable technology, and other related infrastructure improvements. The city received a total of 7 proposals. Through review of the proposals, staff narrowed the selection to 4 companies and held interviews with them. The 4 companies interviewed were Wildan, Climatech, SiteLogic, and NG Services US. Staff is selected to work with NG Services US after our interview process and reference checks. NG's proposal includes the investment grade audit at no cost to the city, and at the end of the IGA, NG will provide a not-to-exceed price. The pricing will be completely transparent with a price breakdown by enterprise fund, facility, etc. The goal during the IGA is to sufficiently design each energy conservation measure in order to provide a not-to-exceed price and guarantee energy savings. The following are the estimated percentage of design at the end of that IGA: lighting at 85%, HVAC at 65%, solar 75%, water meters 85%, and wastewater treatment plant modernization at 35%. During our interview process, NG did some preliminary calculations in regards to the wastewater treatment plant study. Through our negotiations, NG has agreed to perform an IGA level design of the wastewater treatment modernization that will include a viable solution, not to exceed pricing, savings and revenue streams, and operating cost. They have estimated that this could potentially cost them several $1,000s for the wastewater treatment plant alone. It will require periodic meetings with staff and council to obtain feedback that they are on the correct path in developing a financially and technically viable solution for modernization. Escalon School District was a reference for NG and came highly recommended by their board and staff. The project for the Escalon School District was a $6.9 million energy service project. NG does require that we sign an agreement for the IGA, but there will be no cost to that. NG is here tonight and does have a small presentation. So if the council would like, I can have them start that. Carolyn and Patrick are here representing NG tonight.
Carolyn and Patrick, nice to meet you.
Hello, and good evening. Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, city manager and staff. Thank you so much for having us here this evening. My name is Carolyn Kiesner. I'm the program manager and a certified energy manager with NG Services. I'm here with my teammate, Patrick Yost. He's our senior project manager and licensed professional engineer as well. So the goal today, just to briefly introduce ourselves, talk a little bit about our company and some of the opportunities that we see here with the city, okay? So to jump right in, just a little bit about ourselves. So globally, we're actually, NG is actually the largest independent energy producer in the world, with over 160,000 employees worldwide. So we're a very large, financially stable organization, and that's really important when it comes to the guaranteed savings that we guarantee. In terms of our division, so NG Services US, we are actually headquartered in Oakland, and we have 8 offices in California. We have an office in Sacramento and San Jose. I'm coming from Sacramento, and Patrick's coming from Livermore, actually. So why NG? And, we do want to, thank staff. We understand that they went through a very rigorous process, and so we really appreciate our selection, and we're very thrilled to be selected and working with the city. in terms of YNG, so we do have quite a bit of experience, so over 45 years of experience doing energy projects and energy work. In terms of our references, and this has already been spoken about, but we have a lot of strong references, and I think that goes to kind of speaks to our philosophy of partnerships. So just some local references to name a few: Escalon USD, City of Madera, City of Fireball, City of Mendota, Merced County, Madera County, Fresno State. With a lot of the customers we work with, we do multiple phases of work, and that kind of speaks to the work that we do, because they want to keep doing work with us. And so something to mention is that Patrick was actually the lead project manager at Escalon USD, where staff and the board gave us a really great reference. In terms of our project expertise, we have over 34 licensed PEs just in California. We've done a lot of solar, so we have over 300 megawatts under our belt. We have experience and expertise in wastewater treatment plant and all the other scopes that Tammy mentioned as well. And so a couple other things I want to mention. In terms of our team and our approach, we believe in subcontracting locally where we can and when we can, and we have some, Patrick can talk about some of the ways we did that with the school district as well. And in terms of our fiscal strength, again, we're a very fiscally strong organization. We've achieved over 108% of our energy savings and guarantees. And then we've also talked with city manager, is it Alcantor? Alcantor. I wanted to make sure I was saying that correctly, with the no-cost IGA. So we're doing that at no cost for the city. I'm going to hand it over to Patrick to just talk about some of the opportunities that we saw when we met with staff.
There we go. Okay, so yeah, as Carolyn said, we'd be looking at the energy efficiency upgrades throughout the city. So we're talking about auditing all the facilities, looking at the lighting, interior and exterior, converting those likely to LED, looking at the HVAC systems, see if there's any that are past their useful life. We often find those can be 25, 30 years old, and they should really be replaced at 15 to 20 years. Really take a look at all the EMS systems that are in the city. We've been doing a lot of great retrofits lately to wireless thermostats, so that really helps facility staff manage all the buildings throughout the city from one simple console. One thing we looked at actually a couple of years ago was ball field lighting here, possibly looking at the old ball field lights and converting them to LED lighting. We did some really nice LED lighting retrofits for South San Francisco Unified School District, one of their high schools. I was just a part of doing the Salinas High School to LED. It's awesome. It really makes the light quality really improve. And of course, we'll look at water system improvements throughout the city. We're going to look at renewables. We looked at solar PV at a couple of locations in the past. And we'll talk about the wastewater plant in a second. We're going to look at AMI water upgrades, and then, of course, the water treatment plant upgrades. So, oops, let's go ahead here. So, let me note, our wastewater experts were not able to attend, so I am not a wastewater expert, but I'll do the best I can to answer these questions. So, so we started out with the process when we were responding to the RFQ. And we noticed that PACE had done a study on the plant and identified that there's insufficient capacity in the system, and that has a lot to do with the fact that there's a lot of industrial waste going into the plant, and it's actually clogging the percolation basins and making the plant not very efficient. So our wastewater experts have identified different treatment methods that would include UV treatment that allows you to sell Title 22 water, which is agricultural water, so that's a revenue for the plant in the future. We're looking at new processes in which you can take the sludge that you usually have to send to a landfill and turn that into a Class A biosolid, and so essentially you can sell that as a fertilizer. So there's a lot of neat things that we can do at the plant here. The preliminary numbers show that we could have about $20 million of energy savings a year, about $30 million operational savings, and about $33 million in revenue, or over the course of the life of the project. So that's total savings of $84 million from the project alone.
For the course of the life?
Yeah, yes, of course, the life of the project. So, and a key thing of this too is that we did look at the wastewater plant several years ago, and that the wastewater plant doesn't have a lot of land that's sufficient for a solar system, but with the new treatment processes that we've identified here, we can actually take back some of the lagoons and open that up for solar that will help offset some of the costs of operating the plant.
Yeah. And you're bouncing off PACE's study, and you're looking at more so what's the best way to implement what they what they suggested.
Correct, and we have some new ideas too.
With the process of doing the audit with all these items, I can imagine that most of these items will be, fairly simple to a degree. It's all relative.
yeah.
Time-wise, and my gut reaction with the wastewater treatment plant is that part might take longer, because unlike the other items where it would be just you dealing with staff, we also have another partner in the treatment plant that might come into play, and those are the industries in town. So my question is, number one, I'm assuming that that would be a factor in whatever you do. And I know that you're looking at maybe getting the audit to about the 35% level on that. So I would imagine that might be part of that reason. But I would assume that you would be talking with the industries in order to, at least to some extent, to get your audit together for that.
Yeah, absolutely, so.
And the other question is, would that slow down the entire process for all these other items?
I'm gonna go ahead and answer that. It definitely wouldn't. So we would
Okay.
we would develop, that core scope, the energy efficiency along with the renewables, congruently with the wastewater treatment plant. And if we find that, the wastewater treatment plant, which you are correct, it will likely take quite a bit of time to
Yeah.
fully to develop that up to 35%. But we will work with staff on, the best way to move forward, whether it's doing a phase one,
Sure.
looking at the wastewater treatment plant as a phase two, but we'd have that open conversation with council and staff on how they'd want to move forward with each of the projects.
Okay.
Mhm.
I have some
Questions?
Yeah, I do have some questions. First question, which is probably what everybody's thinking, is what is this costing the city, and when are we gonna see all those savings? You know what I'm saying? Like, I understand the theory, we're gonna upgrade and figure out where we can save money and be more efficient, but how much is this really gonna cost, and when are we gonna see that ROI, that return on our investment? When are we gonna break even? And when is this going to make sense for us? Are we talking 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? What are we doing here?
So,
Go
do you want to go ahead?
No, go
Cost
ahead,
savings, what do we got?
Carolyn. Go ahead,
I
Carolyn.
was just gonna say, so, during the development, that's when we'll take a look at everything. We'll take a look at costs, savings, we will, develop the scope, get an agreement with staff on what that scope's gonna be in terms of the process, and then come up with hard numbers, hard savings, and then we would essentially review that with council and staff. And our goal is to get a project where the savings will pay for the project. And that's essentially the goal, and we'll be tasked with understanding that in the next phase.
I'm just, maybe this stuff's way over my head. You guys are engineers, you guys are smart people. And so we are looking at getting a study done, essentially,
So
correct?
they're gonna do the evaluation
At no cost.
at no cost.
Bingo, right.
And
So the approval of authorizing me to enter into the agreement is with no financial ties at this time.
now that sounds good. I think that's a classic, sales pitch. We'll come and do the estimate, no cost, and we'll get that. What will this cost us? What could this cost us? Say you do the study and you go, it's gonna be, here's what we've created and here's our plan, and it's gonna cost you $5 million. What are we looking at here? Is there any way to project that at all?
So I would say we haven't defined the scopes yet, so it's
Mhm.
kind of difficult to
Right.
identify the cost of the program. And
Okay.
that's literally what we're here to do
Mhm.
in the next couple of months, is determine what's in the scope. And we'll actually sit down, what we call an ECM summary, so it identifies each measure that we're talking about maybe implementing, and sitting down with Tammy, staff, and going through, does this make sense? Does it make financial sense? Does it make operational sense? Is there maintenance savings involved in this? And we'll figure out everything, and then that's when we'll come back to you and show you what the program looks like. So it's kind of hard to say what the cost of the program is going to be right now. I think we had the projected cost of the wastewater plant was 34 million, but that's aside to the rest
That
of
was
the
your
ECM.
guys' estimate?
That was a very high level estimate of when they were.
Right.
Yeah, that's nowhere close to what Pace told us, yeah.
But the scope is not.
So we would
Right.
be getting another study done, like the one that Pace did? 'Cause we already paid, for the Pace one.
No, this is working with what their findings are.
Yeah,
I'm just trying
it's
to
a
understand
combination.
How do we
So-
implement
So
them?
their project also included solar. Pace's project didn't include any kind of solar in there when they're talking about their project cost, so.
One concern is that you said you took a look at our wastewater treatment plant and you said that we don't have a lot of land out there. That's exactly the opposite of what Pace told me and their head engineers, that we have a huge amount of extra land out there.
I said, we don't have land for solar right now.
Okay.
So there's no land for solar, but with doing some of the different treatment methods that we've identified, we'd actually take back some of the lagoons and make that land available for solar. So there's actually, our wastewater experts, I was talking to them this morning, they said there's huge potential for the city here because a lot of the, like I'm working on a wastewater plant in Richmond right now, and it's been built out throughout the entire area of the plant. And the problem is now everything has to be customized to fit into that exact space. But with the new treatment methods that we're talking about implementing in the lagoons and such, we actually can roll out modular pieces of equipment that'll just drop in place. And so it'll make it much more, less expensive than building it in a much more confined space. So you're gonna get the benefit of getting space back in the end.
I have a specific question for the Escalon Unified, because that's probably the most closely related thing to what we would be doing. What exactly did you do for the school district? And you said it was about $7 million?
Sure.
And that was the contract you guys got, they paid you, you
Right.
did the work?
Sure. So, so we did solar at all the sites. So,
That's the stuff in the parking lot that we see,
Correct.
right?
Mhm.
Okay.
so the high school, middle school, all the elementary schools, like Collegeville, so we did one out there. So we did the solar, we did lighting, exterior lighting, so all that lighting was changed to LED. We retrofitted the pool pump that's at the high school. It now has a VFD on it that monitors the flow of the water going into the pool and measures the chemical system. So it's a substantial energy savings for them. We also, the El Portal Middle School, there's 5 large HVAC units that were more than past their life. We tore those off and replaced the roof along with replacing those 5 units. Those were fully custom units because of the units that were there.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
I have a question, if I may. So, at the end of the study, the city does not have any requirements to go forward with any of your proposals, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, but if the city does want to go forward on the proposals or some of the proposals that you come back, they have to go through you.
So that's a good question. And so if we come up with a proposal that pays for itself, and the city comes back and says, thank you for all the work that you've done, but we don't want to move forward with you. We're actually going to take this, if you say something like, we're going to take this and do this in-house, or we're going to take this and give this to another company, or use it to get hard bids, that's where we make the decision to actually keep I guess because we were doing this at risk, we would keep, the reason we have the agreement is so we keep all the
Data.
the data and
Yeah,
the
yeah,
information that we
right.
create, because we did it all at risk, and that's the only thing, that property.
It's actually a liability for us too, so in the end,
Well, yeah.
so.
So
Right.
the city would, I understand, I was reading your section 6 that talks about work product, that's what we're
Right,
talking
it would,
about.
we would keep the work product, thank you.
So the city would be able to do it in-house, they just couldn't use your
work
work product,
Exactly,
although,
It could at a price.
sure,
right,
um,
yeah.
although they're gonna have your proposal, correct? So,
Well, technically, yes, they'd have the proposal, but at the same time, there's a lot of other work that goes into the paperwork that goes into
So-
our work product.
so the proposal is not actually part of the work product?
Proposal, so let's say the proposal is a summary of the work product.
Right,
Yeah.
there you
Fair
go.
enough.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
and it's probably the dollars and cents and how that would work if you did it a certain way, but
Right.
how that certain way is, that's yours, that's proprietary at this point.
I got another question. Under preliminary financial analysis over project life, the approximate capital cost is $24 million. What's that approximated capital cost? Is that what would cost the city, essentially? For a project that you guys are
That's,
estimating?
what's on your screen,
Yeah,
yes.
so,
Mhm.
sorry, the capital cost, is 24 million
Okay, and so
for the plan, I said 34.
maybe
before.
that's answering my question. If we're looking at these numbers, it would cost the city 24 million, but over the life of the project, we would save 50 million. Is
Correct,
that what we're looking at?
Yes.
right.
Still gotta have the 24.
Yeah.
See?
So are there any Further questions from the council at this point?
I have one more. After your analysis is done and you come up with a proposal, in that proposal, will you be able to offer a phasing in situation where it's done over a period of time in terms of the actual impact, financial impact, so it could be paid for in different allotments rather than a big hunk of money up front, or how's that work?
So so a couple things. So, and this is something that we haven't even, I think we haven't touched on yet. When it comes to the solar, we will be exploring the opportunity for the city to evaluate a power purchase agreement, and that's where you don't come out of pocket for
Right.
the solar energy. Okay, so you're familiar with that.
Sure.
But in terms of payment on, let's say, the rest of the scope, I mean, essentially, it's typically mobilization payments and,
There'll be a schedule.
right, there'll be a
Correct.
payment schedule, correct.
So we basically, if we're talking about billing, it's billing on percent complete for the project. So like if the wastewater plant's gonna take, 6 months to a year to develop while we'll be implementing the other scopes of work. So because those other scopes of work will be 2, 3, 4 months
Right.
of engineering time, so, yeah.
For the treatment plant, is this something that you're gonna come in and say, this is what we recommend you do, and it's gonna be all-encompassing, and it's gonna be the top tier wastewater treatment plant, or are you gonna give us options? Here's one way, here's a minimal investment, and this is the type of return you can get on that investment.
So I would say we want this to be a working relationship with Tammy and staff. We want to make sure that we're hitting whatever the city wants to look at. And actually, Carolyn noted before, we want to come to the council and get feedback during the process to make sure that we're all in line. So we don't want to sell you the.
Right, because obviously
Hopefully
they
they-
don't want to put a lot of work into something that we're gonna
Can't blame 'em.
turn away. So there will be, discussions and making sure that they're taking it in the right direction.
Because there are options that you can elect to do and not to do as part of the program.
Counselor, are there any further questions? This is an actionable item, so at some point I will need to have a motion if we do choose to authorize.
So what we're authorizing is allowing our city manager to enter an agreement for a kind of discovery, almost like
Exactly.
situation. And
Right.
I would move on staff's recommendation on that.
Okay.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to authorize the city manager to enter into an agreement with NG Service US for an investment-grade audit. Is there any discussion on the motion on the table?
And that permits the manager to go over the wording of the actual contract.
Contract.
See it? Yeah, okay, good.
Okay,
I think you have.
You have a comment in the back.
there is a comment in the back, I hear. Yes. By the way, Carol and Patrick, thank you very much.
Thank
Okay,
you so much.
you have the comment on the microphone. Stay close just in case there's a question that needs to be answered, though, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Kurt Danziger, 389 Noni. This is kind of what came up about 5, 6 years ago, and I think Councilman Legero's had a good question then. Is it a smorgasbord? Can you pick and choose projects out of it? You've had a very extensive wastewater treatment study with different levels of capabilities, and I think the highest one, which included electricity generation off the bio of it, was in the $21 million range, which was, everybody agreed, was a little outrageous at the time, so comparison-wise. It's interesting that the company that came before you 5 or 6 years ago, I think their study was like in the 20-something thousand, and they would recoup that if you signed an agreement to go ahead with any or all of those projects. So I would just point that out from a historical prospect. I think the canneries are a big key here. You're going after them with another company. At some point, it's just got to be one voice. It's just got to be the city, I would think, or they're going to get confused, and maybe they'll go out and get their own study. I don't know. Representative Harder's representative was here a meeting or two ago and offered assistance for grants and those kind of things. So are we gonna be reaching out to them and trying to lower the cost of this, getting state grants, federal grants? I didn't hear anything about that, tonight, so that's a opportunity. The other cities that were brought up, as examples, we don't know what their MHIs are. As we know, we've had trouble with ours getting grants because our MHI is so high. I don't know what Gustine's is. I don't know what Port Hueneme, whoever they are. If that was more capable or comparable for them to have that than us. So, again, going the cheapest route possible. One other thing that's not talked about, and it was part of, I think it was Optera, is the 10% government charge. So whatever project you pick up, whether any or all, is going to include a 10% surcharge that we're going to finance to put money back into the general fund. To me, that just doesn't make sense on any level to pay that back to us at whatever percentage rate for. That's like taking out a loan that we didn't need. I wouldn't do that as a homeowner. Maybe you think differently.
Kurt, actually, that's a good point. If I can bounce off of that really quickly, that is a good question. Tammy, because they're gonna be looking at putting together an audit, okay, with costs and cost repayment plans. So that's gonna have to be part of the process, the government charge. What are the plans with the government charge? Will there be one, if any? Or what are you looking at with that? What's the idea with that?
So typically, a government charge applies to a project that's being funded outside of the general fund, not the general fund's projects. So like if it's a water project, it's to allocate the cost that it takes for staff to initiate with that. So it would be a conversation we would have to have with them. It depends upon the projects.
Okay, and the government charge concept's a bit of a hot button for us, so if we can be kept in the loop on that, that'd be really good.
Sure.
Okay.
Just things to consider. And we talked about picking and choosing projects. Have we heard anything from the PACE project? Are we moving anywhere with that? As comparatively before we start another study?
I think that's where you're at, is trying to put the monies together or the plan together as to how we would want to do that financially. And the way I'm seeing this is a component of that. To how can we modernize that plant to the degree that we want to have it modernized for the next 50, 60, 70 years at the most reasonable price possible. And I think this is going to be another component that might go into what you're going to ultimately present to us. Am I
Right.
correct?
Right, and I'm still working with PACE and the industries too.
We
Yeah.
just haven't found the right mechanism yet. That's the problem.
No, exactly. And I didn't hear one here either. So, again, I'm
Preliminary, so.
just pointing things out, not creating any arguments for or against or anything. I just want to make sure the city makes a real solid thing. We're all in favor of renewable energies, and, whether we just take a project that puts solar on top of the parking out in the back over here and powers this building and the police building, that may just pencil out.
Yeah.
But then again, it's MID, and Sean had brought this up earlier when we talked today, that some of these projects are PG&E and some are MID. And so the savings are not going to be as great on MID projects because they charge less, and they haven't raised the rates since 2012 and are unlikely to do so in the near future since
So
they
the
just.
plant is the MID. The plant, I believe, is MID.
Plant's MID, this building.
This year, I believe.
It is, but that's all things that they would take into consideration when they do that investment grade audit.
Right, and I'm just pointing that out. The more attractive project may be the PG&E type projects, because it'd be the biggest ROI, I would think.
But again, to one of your questions, Kirk, and it's a very good question, we are not obligated to choose the audit comes back. There are some parts that we say, yes, we can do it. Other parts that go, oh, we just, no. we can, for lack of a better word, pick and choose. Please, Carol, if you don't mind, coming up.
Carol, yeah.
Absolutely. So we'd essentially come to you with a menu of different options, and based on the financial viability of each project or the priority of that project, it's the city's project. So we'd formulate the program to reflect that.
Very good.
Do you offer any financial assistance?
So what we do have is we have an in-house financing department that will help evaluate all the different options for the city. And so that's why, we've worked with, for example, City of Gustine, where they had some financial challenges. And we said, I think the only option is to try to apply for the CEC loan, for example. It's a very competitive loan. We weren't sure if we were going to get it for the city, but we put forth a application, and there was 2 projects. There were 5 projects that were awarded by the CEC last year, and we received 2 of them, one for City of Gustine and one for Port Hueneme. The CEC said our application were the most comprehensive applications they had received, which helped fast track those loan applications. So that's something that we can definitely look into, along with the grants. We would look into grants as well, and to just evaluate the different low-interest financing options we're not a financial advisor, but we can help evaluate and reach out to banks on behalf of the city. But yes, we would definitely, investigate all different options that you can use. Right?
That's good to have, good element.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Carol, thank you very much.
Uh-huh.
Is there any further discussion on the motion on the table?
Good evening, Mayor, staff. Sean Stroman, 2445 Yosemite Avenue. Couple things. I am all for the IGA. I think it's definitely helpful. However, as a taxpayer, we have had a hell of a time trying to get chief an extra officer. And I think that now we're going through this energy study. I think there's a more conservative way to do it. And that is, if the city really wants to go solar, why not contact a local commercial solar installer and say, hey, give us a price to do a retrofit of City Hall or the police station.
We've done that with several.
Okay. And my only concern is the whole agreement or the power purchase agreement. So I don't know if you guys know how the power purchase agreement works, but the taxpayers of Escalon won't own the solar equipment. Engie owns the solar equipment. And that's good and it's bad. It's good because Justin's and his guys are already so worked that they don't have time to be fiddling around with solar, but at the same time, as taxpayers, if we're putting forth an investment, we want to see a return on the investment. And Kurt kind of stole my thunder regarding the other thing. Where this gets very sticky is the MID versus PG&E projects. So for those of you that don't know, if you're doing a residential project, the return on investment for PG&E is roughly 2 to 4 years. If you do MID, the return on investment is 8 to 10 years. And the reason for that is because PG&E is on a true-up system where every year, so for example, my home on Yosemite, my true-up is in October. My very first year of savings, PG&E actually had to pay me a credit of $275. I had some problems last year, so my true-up was about $210 I had to pay them. The difference is that MID does not do a true-up. And so like for right now, you're not getting a lot of power use, but you still have to pay the monthly MID bill as you go along, whereas as a residential customer with PG&E, I get those energy savings and it kind of goes into a bank. So I guess my only concern is that, yeah, you get the audit, but I wasn't here at the meeting when the PACE study was done. I guess my question to you guys is, why are we going through the process again and not truly evaluating what PACE did and figure out what is the most fiscally responsible thing for the taxpayers? I'll be honest with you, I haven't read the PACE study. I just found out about it from Kirk, but I think that be very cautious of the power purchase agreement and back to my earlier point, you know, if we're going to the taxpayers and saying, oh, by the way, we're gonna do an energy upgrade at the sewer treatment plant, if it's only gonna cost $27 million, Gary's just trying to find money to do a sidewalk. How can we say, sure, we're gonna spend $27 million in energy upgrades at the sewer treatment plant? So those are just my thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on the motion on the table before we proceed to vote? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of moving to authorize the city manager to enter an agreement with NG Service US for an investment-grade audit, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Motion passes 5-0. Item number 6.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I want to thank those who spoke about this, and because your concerns you brought up have been concerns of ours as well. It's good to see other people think that way, because it's scary. And staff and everyone else is scratching their head trying to find the right way to get things done, and we're just struggling to find something. That's why we're looking at these people and other people, because we know we have to find some solution. We just don't know what that solution is yet. And believe me, none of us are running to sign up a debt to drive us all into bankruptcy. That's something we obviously are very cognizant of. We don't want to do that. But I like the fact that you guys are actually thinking about it. I wish more people in town did.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Alves. Very good comments, very good comments. Item number 6, annual transit update for fiscal year 2018-2019. That sounds like John.
Top of the evening.
Item 5.
Item 5. Oh, I'm sorry, John. Oh.
It's
But I
still
did
John.
have the right person.
Have the right
You have the right person,
I
yes.
kept looking at this one for so long. Okay, item number 5.
You Robert Biden.
Yeah,
Alright.
jeez. Go ahead.
All right, top of the evening.
Jump in.
Mayor and council members, John Ando, Transit
another
Coordinator.
It's okay.
I'm here today to request that you authorize the city manager to execute an intergovernmental agreement with the city of Modesto to operate and maintain the E-Trans transit system upon city of Modesto City Council approval and the California Department of Transportation concurrence. Presently, we contract with the San Joaquin Regional Transit District since June of 2012 to operate the E-Trans transit system through their subcontractor, National Express Transit Corporation. Our transit system consists of one bus that provides demand response dial-a-ride service within the city limits, and then a deviated fixed route to the city of Modesto. We're in our 8th year with our contract with RTD. This service is funded with grants and miscellaneous revenues and does not impact the general fund whatsoever. Since 2017, we've been in discussions with RTD to implement a more enhanced inter-city service so we can change our delivery of providing services within the city limits. We came very close to implementing that plan until RTD in March of 2019 stated that they weren't interested in providing this service because they wanted to look at the inner-city transit system in a holistic manner, which we'll talk about in the next item. So we came to council in June of 2019 to discuss the RTD contract. We presented 7 options for the council to consider because RTD wanted to change the way they're charging the city to provide its transit services, which would be a significant increase in cost. Council directed us to pursue options 3, 6, and 7. Option 3 was to negotiate with RTD to use the Van Gogh contract. Option 6 was to partner with the city of Modesto, assuming that they're interested to operate our service, and then number 7 was to partner with the city of Manteca, assuming that they're interested. We evaluated options 3, 6, and 7, and we've determined that option 6 in developing a contract with the city of Modesto was in the best interest of the city of Escalon. The second page of my staff report gives you a summary of the Modesto costs for base year 3, 4, and then options years 1, 2, 3, and 4 of the Modesto contract with National Express. The transit system, we believe that contract with the city of Modesto will provide better integration for Escalon residents to the Modesto Area Express transit system. Many of our riders do their services in the Modesto area, and many of our riders transfer to the MAX system. In addition, the city of Ceres last month recently approved a memorandum of understanding with the city of Modesto to also operate their transit system. We believe that the city of Modesto is very capable in operating the E-Trans transit system through their subcontractor, which is National Express, the same subcontractor that RTD has. Our contract pricing would be guaranteed through June 30, 2025, as long as the city of Modesto exercises their option use with National Express. Since we do use federal funds from Caltrans does have to concur to this agreement. Caltrans is presently reviewing the agreement now. The City of Modesto's Economic Development Committee earlier this evening approved forwarding this to their council for approval, which is anticipated for April 7 of 2020. Once all the approvals have been received, the city manager, upon your approval today, would execute this agreement. I do have Adam Barth from the City of Modesto's transit manager here, if you would like to hear any comments from him. Otherwise, I'll be happy to answer any other questions that you may have.
I have a question. Can you go back to the slide that shows the cost? Okay, so I just want to make sure I'm understanding this right. So the Modesto cost, and really what I'm trying to break it down is, so this is the cost to Modesto to drive out here, pick people up, essentially? What are we talking about? To transport people? Is that essentially it? How's it going to work?
So how it works is in the National Express contracts that Modesto has, there's a fixed cost that covers like dispatchers and like fixed positions, and then there's a variable cost. We'll pay basically a fixed and a variable rate, which should come around the $110,000 figure.
A year?
A year, yes.
Who's paying that?
That comes out of the transit fund using transit grants that the city receives on an annual basis.
So not out of the general budget? Right?
The general fund has not funded transit since the transit system's inception.
Now, that all sounds great, and I don't think that anybody's gonna have a problem with this because it's not something that's necessarily coming right out of our wallet. But I do wanna make a comment on the, just what's happening here in my mind. I'm looking at our ridership, March, this breakdown you have, and it's got a grand total of 339 rides. The peak month was September, which is 60 people. I'm just gonna say that most of these people are the only people in town who ride the bus. And so I'm just breaking down, I take 110,000, the annual cost to provide this service, and I'm gonna divide it by 75 people. I'm gonna say 75 people in town use it. That's almost $1,500 a year that it's costing per person to drive them around. So, do you see what I'm saying? Are you following that?
Actually, if you don't mind, that sheet I gave you is actually not E-Trans, that's VanGo, and that's gonna be discussed in the next item. The E-Trans transit system actually carried last fiscal year 2,315 passenger trips a year.
Well, I'm trying to see how, the amount of like repeat customers. Now, I don't have the number for you, that's fine. I'm just trying to make a general comment here on government spending in general, because even though we're not spending these monies, it's transit money, it's tax dollars money. We gotta remember that. Every dollar that comes into any government is taken via taxes or fees or whatever. I just call them taxes. And to me, I've made that comment a long time ago about, I just didn't know if having any sort of public transit in town made any sense because the ridership was so low. And I think the reason that we're continuing it is because it's not necessarily coming out of our budget. But I just want to make the comment that it seems pretty exorbitant to me. And so and finally, my last comment is, I just don't know if it's the government's job to provide transit services to people. I'm not sure I believe in that. So I just wanted to make that comment in general. Thank you.
I'll answer your questions in the next item, where we'll talk about the subsidy and the standards that SJCOG has set on this transit system and why the city in 1977 got into the transit business.
Let me add a little here. I've been in this thing for a while, and I've been on this road, the one you just brought up, 100 times. And what you're gonna find out is what I learned: use it or lose it. And that's the way this game's played. So in other words, we're granted so much money from the federal government to accommodate, to facilitate what they perceive as a need in this community. If we don't use it, we lose it. And it's gonna go away to somewhere else or not at all, but we won't have it. Yeah. So, as much as I agree with your philosophy, because that's my philosophy, is that unfortunately, this is one of the situations, it's use it or lose it. That's how this works.
And the fact is, the taxes are still gonna be taken.
Bingo.
Somebody else is gonna get the money, not us.
That's correct.
It's not a
And then-
great deal, but it's the only deal we got going.
And then you have just a small percentage of people that use the bus here in Escalon. However, otherwise, they would be shut in. They would not be able to go to doctor's appointments, to the grocery
Yep.
store, to any other places. And they've been down to these council meetings before, and you think, 8 or 10 people can't cause a ruckus. They can.
Take one mosquito, make you not sleep at night. No, it's a tough one to swallow, but you get used to it. It's the way it is.
Are there any further questions to Mr. Ando on this subject? It is an actionable item, so I would need to have a motion.
Do you want to hear from Adam Barth in any way?
We have a gentleman, yeah, go ahead.
Adam Barth, I'm the transit manager in Modesto. Just wanted to just talk for a moment. As John mentioned, we it looks like we will be starting to operate the transit routes in series, and hopefully here in Escalon as well. As you make the system easier to use, as we are anticipating here, to get people into Modesto and then use the rest of the MAX system, and even get into series, you can do that on all one transit pass. And it makes it all easy. You can use one app to track your bus, to see where it's going, all the way in the whole region. And as you make a system easier to use, more people will use it. Right now, it's very very fragmented. As you have Escalon rates, and you have the Escalon bus. You got to go to a different website for that. And you have Modesto, and you go into Modesto and series, and all over the county as well. So I think this is a great thing to try to make it an easier system to use. And I would encourage you to pass this.
It should be more efficient because it's now got more participants.
Exactly. Yep.
So it should be more efficient for your organization to operate it.
Exactly. Yep, I agree.
Can I make the assumption that you'll also be able to go, let's say, from point A to point B within Escalon with this system, or is it just merely going from one stop in Escalon to Modesto?
It'll still be the same format. The only difference is it'll just say E-Trans operated by MAX.
Sure, okay. Very good.
And we'll follow MAX's procedures and policies and fare structure, so it's one integrated system, which at the end will actually make it easier for our residents versus having to deal with two separate systems with two separate processes.
Okay.
Yep.
Are there any further questions on, by the way, thank you, Adam, thank you very much. Are there any other further questions on this item?
No. I would move on staff's recommendation.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded on staff's recommendation to authorize the city manager to execute an intergovernmental agreement with the city of Modesto to operate and maintain E-Trans transit system upon City of Modesto City Council approval and the California Department of Transportation concurrence. Is there any discussion on the motion on the table? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Motion passes 5-0. And now, we'll move on to item 6. John?
All right, Mayor, members of council. So this is the annual transit update. And this is a report that I give to council every year to just talk about the status of the transit system, any emerging issues, any changes in processes and procedures, and answer any questions on the performance of the transit system. So starting with the annual report, I'll give you an introduction to E-Trans. I gave you a purple brochure. That's our latest schedule that tells you basically what the service provides. E-Trans was named in 2008. E-Trans is a local dial-a-ride service that provides door-to-door service within the city limits of Escalon, anywhere within our 2.3 square miles. And we also provide a deviated fixed route, which comprises of 3 trips between Escalon and Modesto. That route is known as Route 1, and our services operate Monday through Friday. RTD has been operating this service, as I mentioned, since June 1 of 2012. They subcontract this operation. Previously was MV, now it's National Express Transit. The transit system is primarily used by what we call transit-dependent users. These are people that have no other means of transportation due to age, income, or disability. And this has always been the case since the system's inception in 1977. Our service hours are primarily from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. The dial-a-ride operates in 3 pieces, from 9:12 to 11:22, 12:32 to 1:12, and then 2:12 to 3:32. Route 1 operates 3 times, departing Escalon at 8:12, 1:12, and 4:12. throughout the day. Our route basically travels through Escalon, goes down via Kiernan Avenue to Dale Road in Modesto, serves the Kaiser Permanente in Modesto, as well as the Vintage Fair Mall at Dale and Veneman. At that point, our passengers can connect to the Modesto Area Express system to go further destinations in Modesto, as well as MJC, which I know that was a concern for some of our council members, for Escalon students that need to access a higher education. Riders can also transfer to the Stanislaus Regional Transit System to go to other destinations in Stanislaus County, as well as Rippon's Blossom Express, which runs every Tuesday and Thursday, also meets at Dale and Veneman. Page 7 of the annual report, we talk about transit funding. E-Trans is basically funded through a myriad of funding sources, including passenger fares, federal funds, and what is known as the Transportation Development Act, or TDA. As part of the TDA, there's two components. There's the Local Transportation Fund, and then there's the State Transit Assistance Fund. In addition, within the last 2 years, we've been getting what is called the Low Carbon Transit Options Program funding, or LCTOP, and we also been getting the State of Good Repair funding, or SGR, which we use for preventative maintenance. We also get federal funds from Caltrans. That is known as the Section 5311 program, and then we match the LTF and STA funds against the 5311 funds, which supports our operations. Furthermore, we also get Measure K funds dedicated for the services that we provide to the city of Modesto, and that translates to about $40,000 a year from SJCOG. Presently, passenger fares contributes about 3% of our revenues. Measure K is 38%, 5311 is 31%, and TDA funds are the remaining 28%. So basically, with the collection of all these funds that we get, that's what comprises of our budget to operate E-Trans. And again, no general fund subsidizes the system. Now, one thing to note about the TDA is that under the Transportation Development Act law, in the case of Escalon, because we're rural, we have to satisfy what are called transit needs. Every year we have a hearing called the Unmet Transit Needs Hearing. That's where residents can bring up any transit issues. The San Joaquin Council of Governments will then assess those unmet transit needs and determine if they are an unmet transit need and is it reasonable to meet based on a 6-test criteria. If it is reasonable to meet, then we're required to use our LTF to satisfy that unmet transit need. Once all the unmet transit needs have been satisfied, you can then use your LTF for streets and roads. So with our previous practice, we've, the council in 2018 adopted a short-range transit plan where we use a 70-30 split, where 30% of our budget is LTF and 70% comes from other revenue sources. And just because, as you know, we tried to design the transit system to satisfy those unmet needs so that each year you don't have to hear about potential unmet transit needs that are reasonable to meet, which allows you to access 70% of that LTF for streets and roads. We haven't changed the transit system really since 2015, and I believe we have the right system in play for the demand that the E-Trans system is generating. So going on to the performance measures, page 9, we carried 2,315 passenger trips. On average, we carry about 9 passengers a day. We did have a decline from the previous fiscal year, and I'll be honest, we've not been able to attribute why we had that decline, but we do continue to do marketing efforts to promote the transit system. And with this recent action and partnering with City of Modesto, I believe we can now leverage their marketing opportunities to hopefully increase our overall ridership. The dial-a-ride component of E-Trans carried 1,598 passenger trips on the year, and that turned out to about 6 passengers a day on average. Route 1 to Modesto carried 717 passenger trips, and that translates to about 2 passenger trips a day. One thing that we need to note with the way we count passengers is we count them as unlinked passenger boardings, which means that it could be you boarding the bus 6 times, but we treat that as basically 6 different boardings versus 1, since there's not really a mechanism to track unique passenger boardings, and the FTA only wants us to report unlinked passenger boardings. Page 11 shows you our performance in fiscal year 17-18. Page 12 shows you our performance in fiscal year 18-19. The transit system, as I mentioned, is currently contracted to RTD, and they subcontracted to National Express. Our driver presently does all of her own dispatching through a cell phone. We presently own 3 vehicles for the transit system. One is a high-floor cutaway bus, another is a low-floor cutaway bus, and the latter is a minivan. And they can seat wheelchairs, they can seat multiple passengers, they have a bike rack, they have AVL for tracking, and security cameras, and an electronic fare box. Page 14 shows you a picture of the brand-new bus, which is a low-floor bus, which makes it easier for seniors to board the vehicle. So in regards to the performance measures, page 15, SJCOG evaluates us in 3 different criterias. Other transit systems are normally evaluated on fare box recovery. Because the transit systems in San Joaquin County, with the exception of RTD, has struggled to meet the state of California's fare box recovery ratio requirements because of our low ridership, the COG has adopted alternative performance measures. The first performance measure is cost per revenue hour, second is passenger per revenue hour, and third is subsidy per passenger. In order to continue to be able to use LTF funds for the transit system, we have to meet at the minimum of 2 of 3 performance objectives or be within a 5% margin at the end of a 3-year period. SJCOG adopts targets every 3 years. Page 17 shows you what those targets are. In fiscal year 18-19, for operating cost per revenue hour was $72.48, so we did meet the standard that has been set for $145.13, significantly under the standard. For passengers per hour, we carried 1.39 passengers per hour, which we did not meet the standard. SJCOG set our standard at 2.0. But we did meet the subsidy per passenger of $11.85, and the standard that SJCOG set for us was $45.75. So again, we were significantly under the standard, which shows that the way we have this transit system designed is appropriate for the measures that has been set by COG. And we're running the appropriate levels of service, utilizing the funds in a wise manner. Page 20 gives you a historical summary of all of our performance measures and from 2013 to 2019 and how we've have met those standards, if you would like to get an idea on that. Page 20 and 21 gives you a list of all of our accomplishments that we've achieved with the transit system this past fiscal year. Some recommendations on page 20 that we're going to focus on this fiscal year includes we're going to continue to monitor service that is operated by RTD. We're going to continue to work to increase our fare box recovery ratio and reduce operational costs. We're going to work hard to increase ridership among seniors, students, and working families that are transit dependent through various marketing measures. If you've noticed in that we've been advertising in the newspaper from time to time, submitting press releases. Every Wednesday is free transit rides on E-Tran based on our LC Top grant, so we're hoping that will generate ridership. We advertise in the movie theaters in Modesto, and we do special events such as the Stuff the Bus in partnership with Marvell Food Store, RTD, and Manteca Transit. And then we do holiday light tours in the Christmas time, which is another way to get people to come and take advantage of the transit system. We're also working on seeking an alternative transit operations maintenance contractor, which we just passed action on.
Don't you also offer advertisement on the bus?
We do.
Where does
And
that money go to?
that goes to the transit system.
Okay.
And Honey Air is advertising on
I saw
2
that,
of the 3 buses, and they have been for the past 3 years. So every year, we're getting this nice steady income that's being added to the transit system. So there's been, I believe, my understand, was that there's times where we're coming in less on the LTF because of the additional revenues that we're generating.
What about, isn't it possible to take a bicycle on your trips too?
It is. We can carry 2 bicycles on the bus, on the front of the bus. And the minivan, last year, we installed a bike rack as well, so that we can put bikes on that.
You could ride over there and ride back if you chose to.
That's correct.
I like
Okay.
And the nice thing about it is the MAX system, START system, they all have bike racks on their buses as well, so that can extend the reach for a transit rider.
Perfect.
Does this, switch to Modesto, does that change our driver?
The present driver, she works for National Express, and once Modesto's council takes action, we'll advise her if she wants to transfer divisions, basically from the Stockton division to the Modesto division. She'll have that opportunity. If not, then Max is prepared through their National Express contract to find a driver that can take on the system. On page 22, we get additional services from various transit providers in Escalon that comes to us at no cost to the city of Escalon. So starting with RTD Go, previously RTD had a partnership with Uber, and that service was discontinued on October 31st of 2019. And this was the only way Escalon residents was able to get to other destinations in San Joaquin County, because RTD canceled Route 95 in 2009, canceled the commuter bus in, I believe, 2007, and then canceled the dial-a-ride program that they had in 2017. Most recently, page 23, RTD created VanGo, which is a micro-transit service that operates in 4 zones throughout San Joaquin County, Monday through Friday from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., and Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. In order to use VanGo, you have to have an app, and basically you put where you are on the app and where you want to go, and they'll dispatch a vehicle within a reasonable amount of time. The sheet that I passed out to you is actually all of the riders that use the VanGo system since its inception back on March 25th of 2019. So in the case of Escalon, in 2019, there was 339 passenger trips that have used VanGo to go to Manteca, Ripon, or to the transfer point at the, I believe that is at the Starbucks on Frontage Road in 99 to connect to Stockton.
When you say a reasonable amount of time, John, could you be a little more specific?
Well, the system is oversubscribed, which is why I didn't give you a time, but a reasonable time, and right now in VanGo's eyes, could be 90 minutes to 180 minutes.
That's what I wanted to know.
That was not the intent. Originally, they were saying it was supposed to be 20 to 30 minutes, but
Which would be reasonable.
yes.
So you said to ride VanGo, you need an app?
You need an app, or you can call an 800 number if you don't have an app.
So there's no way they can track, you said something about you can't track unique users. I think with the app, shouldn't they be able to figure out who's riding consistently? You know what I'm saying?
That's what you're saying. I'll have to ask RTD if they're able to do that with their app program.
To me, that would be a very useful thing for a program like this, to know, okay, say it's 339 total trips. That's not 339,
People, correct.
It might be 60
Correct.
people using the whole thing all year.
Correct.
So if I was you, I would look into that. Yeah, I'm curious about that.
Okay, we'll investigate that. In addition, as I mentioned, we connect to START and MAX and Ripon Blossom Express. Last year, the Council of Governments created a service called Access San Joaquin, which is the Consolidated Transportation Service Agency. They claim 2% of LTF off the top before it's distributed to the cities to provide a host of services to benefit the senior and persons with disabilities community. That includes ADA paratransit assessment, travel training, discount fare card, access pass for if you're certified for paratransit, you get free rides on all fixed route transit services in San Joaquin County, a volunteer driver program for people who can get to medical appointments, including Kaiser and Sutter Gould in Modesto, previously the RTD Go partnership with Uber, and then most recently the RTD VanGo partnership. Page 25 shows you the value that the CTSA has provided to Escalon. We only certified 2 paratransit clients last year, had 0 travel training, issued 1 discount fare card. RTD Go through Uber, unfortunately, Uber was not willing to share the unique data, so 568 people used it last year, but I'm not sure how many of those were within Escalon. And then the $599 figure, now we have a clearer figure from RTD. It's actually $339 that benefited Escalon. The transit managers have expressed some concerns about the performance of the CTSA. We have provided a formal letter to SJCOG and RTD on how could we improve the performance and make sure that the CTSA is providing a value to the county, especially since it is taking 2% of LTF off the top before it's distributed to the cities. Previous to the CTSA, we all got that 2% distributed between the 7 cities and the county. Moving on to emerging issues, page 30. Pages 26 through 30 just gives you an idea of all the performance standards that have been established in our short-range transit plan and if we met the standards or not for the transit system. Some things to note that council should be aware that is emerging, that's coming up into this fiscal year, next fiscal year. Our high-floor cutaway vehicle is more likely going to be needing replacement soon. It's been in service since 2011, and it's approaching 150,000 miles. We do have grant funds that we need to expend by 2023 to replace that vehicle. I know we talked about replacing that vehicle last year, but council wanted to hold off until we determine the future of what E-Trans is going to look like. So I may
You
be...
have to replace that?
Well, we have to spend the funds by
How many
2023.
how much do we have?
We have 86,000. And the cutaway would cost about 75,000. We need to decide if we want to get a small minivan or a cutaway, so we're assessing the ridership demand before we make that recommendation.
How about a Corvette? And more people will ride, it'll be more fun.
It would be attractive, right?
Try something new here, you know? Make it interesting, a Camaro, 2 Camaros.
John, as far as the energy that runs the vehicle, are we locked in anything?
Yes, and that's another emerging issue that's coming up. The California Air Resources Board has mandated that all transit agencies need to convert to zero emissions by 2040.
Electric buses?
Huh?
Electric buses?
It could be electric or hydrogen.
Oh, nice.
Even wind, if we can demonstrate that there's a bus that's powered by wind. But we have several years before we need to develop a strategy, because cutaway buses are generally replaced every 7 years. But we need to start thinking, how are we going to transition the fleet to zero emissions by that deadline? We're going to continue to be aggressive in marketing the transit system, and we'll definitely partner with Modesto going forward into the future with their marketing activities, so we're doing a unified marketing approach.
Would there be funding for either a hydrogen or electric apparatus for us to use to fill our ride up?
Yes, there are some grants that are available. We haven't pursued those right now since we haven't had a need to, but there's the VW settlement. The San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District has some funding. I anticipate the state, through various cap and trade, will be issuing some grants as well that we can pursue when that time comes.
Perfect.
One significant change that's going to impact the city going forward is, starting with the next fiscal year, SJCOG adopted a new LTF policy. We fought hard to make sure that we didn't have to be subject to the LTF rules that the larger transit agencies would have been subject to, because, quite frankly, we just don't have the transit demand to warrant 100% LTF use in the city of Escalon. So the COG board did approve that we will be allowed to spend 75% of LTF as the cap on streets and roads, provided we don't have any unmet transit needs, and we always have to reserve at the minimum 25%.
Perfect.
So with the fact that we have these various grants coming in, I anticipate there's going to be a few years where we're going to actually have an LTF reserve, which could possibly be used for capital needs or whatnot.
Our allotment on an annual basis, is it stagnant or does it move around?
It moves around depending on the economy, since it's sales tax driven and gasoline tax driven.
Okay.
But we've been averaging about 303,000 a year right now. And we tried, as I mentioned, maximize a large number of that to streets and roads.
Okay, so the money that we're granted and we're not consuming is in a fund somewhere?
It's in a fund somewhere, yeah, basically at the county auditor.
It's a county auditor maintains it? Okay.
That's correct. So with that in mind, we're going to have to be mindful that we may have a reserve. Also, we have to be mindful that ACE is expanding to Modesto and Ceres, and they're going to be adding another train. And under the LTF TDA rules, rail is off the top. and rail may be asking for more monies once that extension to Modesto and Ceres take play. I know ACE is working, or the Rail Commission is working with Stanislaus County to contribute some of their fair share to that service, but we anticipate that the Rail Commission will be asking for more LTF, which will potentially affect the LTF that Escalon and the other cities would get for streets and roads and for transit purposes. So we're gonna have to be mindful that if we wanna do projects, do it now before rail takes more of the LTF. As I mentioned, RTD is no longer interested in doing the recommendations in the short-range transit plan because they wanna look at the inner-city transit service holistically. We anticipate, now that we're talking inner-city service right now, RTD has put notice that if resolution is not achieved by June 30, they'll discontinue the inner-city system. The cities collectively are working with SJCOG and RTD to develop a funding mechanism for the inner-city system, which may include redevelopment of a route that will come back to Escalon again, as well as reducing the hours of the system so in essence it can live within its means. The system is significantly underperforming. It hasn't been changed in about 10 years, and the cities have collectively agreed that they don't want to help fund a system that's not performing or operating in the interests of the cities. So we'll keep the council apprised how that discussions go. We believe there's enough regional funds to operate that system without any LTF from any of the cities. We just need to make sure that SJCOG and RTD agree with our assessment on that. The next one is VanGo. As I mentioned, VanGo is a countywide service that is operating basically throughout the county in 4 zones. The transit managers of the county do not believe that service is sustainable. It's costing $2.8 million a year, and it has a subsidy right now of approximately $101 per passenger to operate. They're using a host of funding that's guaranteed for 1 year. We're concerned that if this system continues to grow without a sustainable plan, that is going to become an unmet transit need that all the cities are going to be hit with, which means that ultimately the cities are going to have to fund this with an LTF, with their LTF. So SJCOG has heard us, and they're analyzing the system and devising some recommendations to RTD so that we can have a sustainable program. The original intent of VanGo was to really take folks from the rural areas to the cities. But however, it's morphed into something greater than its original intent that the county asked for. And that's all I have, and I'll be happy to answer any other questions on the transit system if there are any.
Council members?
The thing we have is we have a system that's kind of limited in what we got to do with it. I mean, if we go to electric buses, that's not gonna change anything other than the aspect of the environment.
Correct.
But that doesn't change the dynamics of the traveling and how it's done. And yet, we don't have any trains, obviously. If we had maintained the track from here to Modesto, we'd have that, but that's gone. So we're stuck with this system for as long as we can imagine. And then the only other 2 options, of course, is the energy we use in them.
Yeah. You're right on point. We have, as I mentioned, we've designed the system in a manner to where it provides the most basic level of service to those that truly need it. And it's nothing more than that. And I don't think until the demographics of this community changes, if it does change, I don't foresee the system growing beyond what you have today.
Well, John, I appreciate the report, and I appreciate all that you do, and thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you for your time.
At this time, I'd like to move on to item number 7, and I will turn the floor over to Tammy.
Mayor and council, tonight staff is asking the council to introduce and waive the first reading of an ordinance amending sections 13.04 and 13.10 of the Escalon Municipal Code, and adopt a resolution adopting a policy regarding the discontinuation of water service. Our former Governor Jerry Brown signed SB 998, the Water Shutoff Protection Act, at the end of 2018. The purpose of the act was to provide additional procedural protections to residential water customers before the discontinuation of water service. The act is codified at Health and Safety Code 116900 and expands on existing procedural safeguards contained in the Public Utilities Code and Government Code relating to utility service disconnections. SB 988 applies, it's SB 998, applies to all urban and community water systems. An urban and community water system is any public or private water system that supplies water to more than 200 service connections. Hence, the city of Escalon is required to comply with the SB 998, effective April 1st of 2020. The city of Escalon must adopt a written policy on discontinuation of water service for non-payment and make it available on the water system's website. This policy must be available in English, Spanish, Chinese, Tagalog, Vietnamese, Korean, and any other language which is spoken by 10% or more of the people within the system's service area. The policy must contain the following information: a plan for deferred payments, alternative payment schedules, a formal mechanism for a customer to protest or appeal a bill, a telephone number for customers to contact to discuss options for averting discontinuation of residential service for non-payment. With the assistance of our legal counsel, Best & Krieger, staff has developed the policy. The policy has been reviewed by the legal counsel and confirmed to meet all requirements of the Act. With SB 998, changes are also needed in our municipal code, and they are being proposed in the attached proposed ordinance. Some of the major changes with SB 998 requires that payments for residential water service must be delinquent for at least 60 days before a water system may discontinue residential water service. Existing law is 34 days. No less than 7 days before discontinuing residential service for delinquent payment, the system must attempt to provide notice to the customer by telephone or in writing. Our existing law is a 15-day notice. If the customer's address is not the address of the property to which the residential service is provided, the notice must also be sent to the residents, the address of service to the occupant. All notices required under the SB 998 must be provided in all the same languages as previously noted. No discontinuation of service during an appeal of a water bill. No discontinuation of service under certain medical and financial circumstances if the customer agrees to an amortization payment schedule. SB 998 requires the water systems to annually report to the State Water Resource Control Board the number of times the system has discontinued service due to inability to pay. The Act also requires posting of this information on the water system's website. Our current bills are due 30 days after mailing. Staff is proposing that we make the bills due 7 days after mailing. The 60-day delinquent applies to residential customers, and non-residential customers will have service disconnected in the 30 days delinquent. So I did do an example of a timeline. Currently, our bills, if they're issued on January 1st, are due February 1st. We send out reminder notices on February 2nd. Late fees would be applied on the 8th and also given a 5-day disconnect notice. And then on the 15th, disconnections would be made. With the new policy, January 1st, bills would be mailed to the customers. Bills are due on the 8th. We would send reminder notices to customers on February 2nd. Late fees would be applied on the 8th. The 22nd of February, 15-day notice issued for disconnection. March 1st, we actually would be sending out a whole nother bill prior to any disconnections. March 6th, door hangs must be, we must hang a door hanger on unpaid service with a 48-hour notice. And then on March 8th, we would disconnect service for that January unpaid bill. So it convolutes the system within the matters of tracking for accounting purposes, and it increases the demand of our staff. So SB 998 will require additional staff time to process the additional notices, phone calls, and door hangers. There will be additional cost in translating all communication into the multiple languages. Currently, customers are allowed to make payment arrangements they are required to pay prior to the next billing statement. With SB 998, that requires payment arrangements that extend beyond the 60 days. The policy outlines if approved, a customer's unpaid balance may be temporarily extended for a period not to exceed 6 months after the balance was originally due. Finance director shall determine the length of the extension to be provided to the customer. The customer must remain current on all water service charges occurring during any subsequent billing periods and may not enter into another arrangement prior to the initial arrangement being paid. So if a customer made, excuse me, a payment arrangement on the January bill, they couldn't, if they didn't complete that arrangement, they couldn't make an arrangement on their March bill. So they can't have two arrangements going at one time, and they have to stay current with any other subsequent bills that come out. If a customer has been granted a payment arrangement, the city is required to post a final notice of intent to discontinue the service in a prominent and conspicuous location at the service address at least 5 business days before discontinuation of the service. So attached to your staff report is the proposed ordinance with amending sections 13.04, 020, 13.04, 180, and 13.1040 of the municipal code, the red line version of the municipal code, the resolution adopting a policy regarding the discontinuation of water service.
Tammy, quick question. You are asking for two actions. Can they be combined into one motion? It seems like they can be congruent. Okay,
Sure.
that's fine. So the council members keep that in mind. Do you have any initial questions?
How many notices go out each cycle?
So when we do late payments would be probably one that's gonna be affecting this, and we can have 300, up to 300.
Late payments?
Those are the reminders that get sent out the day after bills are due?
Not the, but reminders are more.
Oh, yeah, like.
It's when we go to do the, late fees, and that's typically our 5-day disconnect, it ranges between 200 to 300,
What's our total? How many do we send out?
2,500.
So by changing the
About a fifth of them.
the timing of the, the due dates and all, are we gonna create more work for ourselves?
Oh, yeah.
As opposed to just saying, you know what, we bill it on the 1st, it's due on the 1st of the following month. These people that have late, chronically are late but pay in that time frame and stuff. Is this gonna change that procedure?
Yeah, the bill does, because so typically right now, when we're disconnecting, it's about 45 days after the bill's been issued. We can't even disconnect until it's late for 60 days. So if we kept it, where we send it out on the 1st of one month and it's due the 1st of the next month, it would be almost 90 days after you issue your bill before you would be able to disconnect somebody who hasn't paid their bill.
But how many people actually go to that point where you're ready to shut the water off?
So, on disconnection days, we're averaging about, be somewhere in the range of 20 to 30, but that's up till that day. We're going to have to give a notice ahead of time, and typically we could get 30 payments up to 2 days right before we do disconnects. So we're still gonna have to notice somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 to 100 people that we're gonna shut your water off, and it has to be in those multiple languages.
In that period of time when they're subject to pay or quit, is the assessment added to it for the late fee included?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know about changing the timing. It's gonna impact all the other people that are, on, they have auto pay or whatever.
So we're not proposing, we're proposing that the due date is changed, but really the same timeline almost to follow for when we send out reminder notices and when the late fees would be on. So, because we're changing where that start date of delinquency starts, is ultimately the goal because of the 60 days. So that I narrow down that window, so it's not 90 days now, it's only 70 days.
So but if you sent out the notice on, right now, if you sent the notice out on January 1, bill is due February 1, and it's on a automatic withdrawal. Now it's gonna be due on, the bill's gonna go on January 1st, it's gonna come out on the auto withdrawal or auto pay on January 8th.
Not necessarily. So they sign up for those agreements like that. And at this point, we wouldn't have to change those agreements because it wouldn't affect them in regards to any late charges.
Okay, so you would still have bill go out on January 1, and the people that are on an auto pay, it's gonna come out on February 1st still?
It could, yes.
'Cause it just seems to me that clearly the state has decided that they don't want people's water shut off. And what we're doing in this is we're impacting everybody else who does what they, are supposed to do.
Which is why what's being proposed is it keeps the basis of how we currently operate for those that pay on time without penalizing them. So while the due date changes, they still have that full 30 days to pay before there's any kind of late charges. They still have that same period.
That segment of the population probably is not gonna ultimately be affected. I mean, well, the worst case scenario, okay, you'll get tired of getting the reminder notices and you'll go, oh, let me just move my date up, a few weeks.
So right now, any of our auto pays don't get our reminder notices, and they wouldn't get their reminder notices even in the proposed changes.
Yeah, it sounds like the entire purpose of, again, moving that date up is, again, not to negatively impact us too much. I mean, you're talking about 90 days out.
Correct.
That's a long time.
And then it gets convoluted because then those customers that don't pay, they have two bills on their account.
Yeah, yeah.
Which does it cost to turn the water back on?
Well, if somebody is disconnected, it's a $40 charge.
What's amazing is they have the money to pay the late fees and the reconnection, but not the bill on time.
And we do currently make payment arrangements. That's been standard practice. We've always done that. We've just limited it that those arrangements do not go beyond when we're gonna issue the next bill. So that they don't have those two outstanding bills, so.
So I just don't know if we're just going, a little too far on it, because it sounds like, whoever is paying late and they're trying to avoid getting their water shut off, we're giving them 90 days basically, with the way the system is set up currently, if we
No.
implement these changes.
No, they're not getting more than 60 days at this point.
So-
They're getting 45 to 50 days.
And then, but with this, they've gotta have a minimum of 60 days, right?
Yeah, it's gonna be closer to around the 70 days.
Yeah.
So I just don't know if we're, if we're changing everything around, we're impacting, and maybe we aren't going to impact, the 2,300 or 2,400 people that do it right, just for the handful of people that are gonna take it right to the deadline anyways, so. And I don't know if we accelerate the process, are we creating more work for staff, as opposed to just, if we're gonna continue doing what we're doing, we're just gonna add this layer of new notifications in the multiple languages.
Well,
and
the
stuff
new
like that.
notifications that's all required.
Right, but you're gonna put that on top of our existing way of doing business.
Well, in some of it, I don't think that we're changing for those that currently pay on time, I don't think that they're gonna probably notice much. The biggest thing is they're gonna see the due date change, but technically, it's not really gonna change the way that their bills are functioning. Those that pay late are gonna, take it to the end.
Whether it's 70 days or 90.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Well, they're gonna absorb that fee one way or another, so they figure, why not wait the whole time?
Uh-huh.
That's the mentality.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if anything we do is gonna change that, but you're right, there is a certain segment, okay, it's due 30 days from now, I'll have 30 days to pay it. You know, and that's on them. I mean, that's, you know, what are you gonna do? You
So
can't,
the bills will have the due date on there, and then we also put on there when late fees are applied, which will have the later date. It's not like 5 days after the due date or anything like that.
the question for the audience.
Good evening again, Mr. Mayor and council. I think I said my name earlier, so I'm not going to repeat it. But Councilman Legero brings up a very good point, and that is, I was sitting in the back kind of scratching my head because it's actually creating a lot of confusion. And I think it's going to create a lot of confusion to the citizens because, and not only that, you hit us with increased water rates. And now we're gonna get a bill that says, oh, and by the way, your water bill's due in 7 days. And I think it's gonna create, I understand what Tammy is doing and why she's doing it. God bless the state of California, another lovely bill. But I think it's going to create havoc for you guys as city council because people are going to come and say, what the heck, now my water bill's due in 7 days? I don't know if you can clarify that somehow in a water bill, but it's going to wreak havoc. And I know this is a public meeting, and I'll throw myself under the bus. When I moved from one side of town to the other, I stopped service at my one address and started service at my new address. And little did I know, I got hit with 2 water bills. I had the old water bill from the old address and the new water bill from the new address. Now I get, so fast forward, now we have this 7-day time frame. I'm looking at the bills going, it's in the middle of summertime. I now have to pay $600 in water bills in a matter of 7 days. I think there should be a way to slap the hands of the people that get their water shut off routinely than the rest of us. I admit I'm late sometimes I just forget, but I've only had it shut off one time, and that was just because I didn't know about the 2 different bills coming from one address to the other. But I think that it's gonna create a lot of confusion. That's all.
The only thing we can do is what we've done in the past, I think, Tammy, is that when we get these type of situations, we throw a little flyer in the water bill. Kind of a brief explanation of what a circus we're dealing with, but in language doesn't sound like we're a circus, it's just another state law that just happens to fall into our laps. I mean, that's the only thing we can do without, and we can also post it on the city webpage with explanation, and for those who are interested in knowing why the information's come their way, this is the explanation for it. I mean, that might be the easiest way to deal with it, I don't know.
I think the way we're proposing it here, we would have to do that because people are gonna be confused because they're not gonna know what the change is. If we leave it as is, with the billing cycle the way it is, and then you add the layer, the new requirements on top of that, you're extending it, what, 20 days? You know, for enforcement, so, and those are on the 300 people that maybe aren't paying attention. And then when they get the notices, those people start to pay, or they've got a extra 20 days or so to get it done before their water's gonna get turned off. So I just don't see the need to go to accelerate the process and impact everybody that's doing it right and have to explain to them why the bill is due in 7 days rather than 30 days. And to me, that would almost create more work. The way I envision it, it's just creating, that potentially could create more work for staff as opposed to just, you know, dealing with the new regulations for those people that are not complying as is.
Yeah, I might want to respectfully disagree with Councilmember Legero on this one, because the way I'm looking at this, either way, either under our current system or under the new system, you'd have about 38 days before late fees are applied. And I'm looking at it as in, would you say February 1st bills are due versus January 8th bills are due? And then so you have that entire period. To me, that just looks like a grace period where nothing's going to happen to you. And if you're, so either way, either the current system or the proposed system, come 38 days out, you're going to get dinged with late fees at that point. And then January 1st, 38, maybe it's like more like 40 days, something like that. So that's the only reason why I don't have a big issue with this, knowing that essentially there's a grace period that we're looking at. And however, I agree though that, I think you send flyers out and, there's no need for the city and the staff to take the slings and arrows on this one. It's a state, and everybody needs to know this is what the state does, is one size fits all. And I would definitely have an explanation as to why we're doing this and why it has to be this way. Not our idea. So,
Got a question for you. Dave Bellinger, 1420 Winterbrook. So we're looking at changing the grace period before you potentially turn off somebody's water by 20 days, by changing this system. Whether it's the 20 days or not, at the end of the day, how many people were we shutting off that we're not having turned back on? We push them out. Somebody pays the late fees, the disconnect, the reconnect fees. How much is the city at risk? Not the workload or anything else, by pushing in that 20 days or whatever, by not changing anything. City can afford to float the water bill for a few delinquent people until they get it settled up and they pay all their fees. 20 days doesn't make a scratch on anybody. So why are we making this big change when you're not really making a big impact?
Part of the concern
If half the
is-
citizens were doing it, I'd understand it, but we're not talking a large population here. At the end of the day, it's 20 days.
And part of the concern is because we already bill in arrears, that you're just farther out for that person to, sometimes on disconnect day, we find out that somebody's moved out.
How much have we written off in the last year for unpaid water bills?
I don't know that off right now.
Because if it's not that much, then it's irrelevant. If it's a bunch, then we need to move it up. But if we're not writing any money off for unpaid water bills, it shouldn't make a difference one way or another. Just my thought.
yeah, and probably to that point, I'd say that those, that 20 days, it's gonna be the same people, 20 days shorter, 20 days long. You wanna give them a year? It'll be a year. I mean, it's just how they work. They will never pay the stuff on time, so.
What if you're on vacation, January 1 through the 15th, and you get your late payment, after that? I think the whole key here is the reporting to the state.
Right.
That's what this is all coming to. How many delinquents do you have? Who are they? What nationalities are they? And what are you doing to, I guess, serve them better? I don't see that this is a help. You're changing some dates, you're making it harder for staff. I just look at this as, what do you really need to be doing? When you get your form up, how many people would actually line up in that report, let's say on an annual basis to the state, or shut-offs?
Well, if we're averaging 20 to 30, you'll be looking at 180.
180, and probably less if they get a longer period.
On both cases.
Well, you would think, but I doubt that. I think you're probably the ones that get shut off would still get shut off. And your question about
Thing you might
vacation,
do is
it
light a
doesn't,
fire under
it's
some of
not gonna
these guys,
change
that's it. But
anything
most
the
people
way
are
that
gonna
the regular bills are now.
see anything.
Yeah, I just I don't see a need to send pay your bill by 7 days. Do businesses pay in 7 days? Usually they're 30 days,
Correct.
and it just seems like an unnecessary move there. I think if you're really concerned about keeping low-income people, not scofflaws that don't want to pay, the low-income people that, making a hard time ends meet, there can be a program here in the city for that, but this just seems like a lot of work for not a lot of results.
Can I clarify a couple of things? First of all, this does not affect the non-residential users, right? We're only talking about changing the code on residential users. And in short, we have to adopt most of this because the state has said that's what you have to do. The only thing that we're really discussing here is when to start the clock for when we consider somebody delinquent. That's really the only thing that's what's in discussion that we feel like we're talking about. If we use what staff and what we're recommending is to start the clock of when somebody's delinquent sooner, it still gives somebody an extra, what we're saying, about an extra 20 days. So automatically, even with our shorter fuse, someone still has an extra 20 days. And if we don't want to adopt this one particular item we're discussing, that's actually now giving somebody about a month and a half extra time to pay, which, as staff has been indicating, that might actually start affecting us because we might not be able to recoup another month and a half's worth of back, arrears payments if those persons have moved on and so forth. But really all we're talking about is when to start the clock for delinquency, and by starting the clock for delinquency sooner, where the persons now only have an extra 20 days, essentially.
Like Tammy said, it's getting so messed up because you've got one delinquency on top of another one, and you're trying to keep track of the last one. Now you got the new one coming on, then you gotta set the timer on the next one. It's a circus.
But here's the flip side. If the intent of this bill is to give these people time to pay and not get their water shut off, I look at this and think, oh, the city's trying to get around it by advancing the due date. So you're trying to circumvent the intent of this extension. So I think that opens us up for somebody to challenge it too.
I don't know, that's a good question for Mark. I mean, how open and shut do you think this is in terms of a challenge?
That's a valid point. There's a lot of that.
It's one of those consequences that the legislature just doesn't anticipate. They put something in, and then, the implementation by the cities and the counties are this. I think everybody's comments are absolutely correct. Everything from the intent to putting some flyers in for education. I don't see what the legal challenge would be, but, if you're putting me on the spot on that one. But, because the legislator, sure, the intent was to give persons extra time to pay their water bill, but it didn't specifically address this, so.
Right, yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong, as a business person, the first thing I read on this, I immediately thought cash flow, which, to your point, unintended consequences, they probably aren't business people in there because the concept of cash flow is directly hit on this one. And how long can you let that go? And again, my point, 90 days is an awful long time. Sorry about that.
Mr. Mayor, I am on no means on a fixed income, but I'm speaking for our citizens that are on a fixed income. And I know as well, I've been there where I've said, okay, I have 20-day grace period, I can pay here. But unfortunately, the generations before me, they don't pay on a grace period. They look at when the bills are due and they say, so in this instance, if we're modifying this, now they've budgeted their bills for January 1st and they get a water bill and they think, well, I've spent all my money now, I have a $200 water bill that I have due on the 8th. How am I gonna pay that? And now you're creating a burden on them. And if you say, oh, but you have a 20-day grace period, they're gonna say, my generation's never paid on a grace period. My generation's been raised to pay on the date that it was due. So.
I would tell you, most of them pay on the date it's issued.
Well, God bless them.
That generation, yes.
Sometimes they come knocking.
Wow.
Where's my bill? I haven't gotten it.
So I guess, is there a way, back to what the city attorney mentioned, is there a way to move that timeline up to start the delinquency and keep the due date the same? I don't know.
The due date is what starts the clock for the delinquency.
I would suggest that if the council wants to make a motion, and
Thanks.
thank you very much, and council is correct, 99% of this, we have to approve, we don't have any choice, okay? So it really is just about the start date. And if you wanted to change that start date, I would just make that motion with the idea that you're going with we'll accept this, but with the existing 30-day bill due date. So right now, so the proposal is that it'll be due 8 days later. The current system is that it's due 30 days later, and then you would just make that one caveat that, in the motion.
Is this gonna make things easier for staff if we adopt it as is? Will it make it more efficient?
I don't think, I mean, I just think that the bill has made it difficult for us all around,
Oh,
so.
so,
Do you prefer the due date the way you've set it up on this here? Is that what you prefer?
Go ahead.
So I would like to comment since I'm the one that handles
Why
it.
not?
But, so if you keep it as is, I will be in the middle of billing and shut-offs at the same time, which requires my complete and full attention for each one. That
So
takes
adopting this will
three
help
to
you
4
out.
days of me just doing billing, and I'll have to do the reminders, the shut-offs,
Yeah, I forgot about that.
all that. So it'll
Adopting
put
this
me
will-
in the worst bind. I would actually have to have someone else to help,
So what's your preference?
to keep it the way it's proposed.
Okay, fine.
With the week or the
I
8
would rather
day.
answer the calls from here to there about the date changes than have to deal with both of those things
I
at
think
once.
that's fine. Just put a flyer in the mail and let them look at it. Half of them won't read it anyway.
Quick question for you. When I was living in Turlock, as their water rates increased, like ours are gonna increase over the next few years, they got a little bit more than where we're going, but they switched to a program where it was an every month billing, so that one, people could budget a little bit better for those on fixed incomes instead of an every other bill. Would something like that help this situation at all, by going to a monthly bill and something where folks can pay automatically without the $5 fee, anything like that?
So there is
For online fees?
currently, I mean, I'll address your first question. If to go monthly would not technically help us at this time, because that's additional manpower to go out and read the meters monthly, and because we are not automated. If we had an automated
Automated, then we can
system,
do something?
then we could go to the monthly. It would be much easier. It's all automated, the
What year
review
is that
process of the
implemented from our
billing.
water rate increase project?
So that's part of that, the RFP is looking at the water meter switch out also.
What NG's doing, or? I thought we
Correct.
already agreed we were putting new
Correct.
smart
They're
meters on
going
with
to,
our water increase.
That's part of the new plan.
yes.
So now we're gonna have somebody relook at that as well.
It's not necessarily that they're re-looking at it, they're assisting us in with that process.
The implementation now.
Yes.
As to when it'll roll out.
You're analyzing our analyzation.
Okay.
So secondly, customers do have the option to pay their bill without having a $5 charge. It's called an ACH payment that we set up, and we automatically pull the payment then. So that option is already out there.
Okay, I was just thinking with the shorter window for Mom's example, today it's billed on the 7th, she'll break whatever she has to get here by the 7th. She's not the only one in that generation to do that. If you went to a monthly, it's easier to set up for those folks as well and just drop it in, is all I'm
Get
thinking.
paid the day they come in. My
And
wife
as
will
we
let it hit the
increase our
ground.
water bills, it's easier to manage bills and stuff, so.
Yeah, I don't know what the answer.
Okay, this is an actual item, so,
Let's be clear on it. So what, if I were to go on staff's recommendation, what are we getting here? We're gonna get the one that says.
you're getting, where to go?
And that was the one that works best for
The
her.
change in the date.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go with, I'm gonna move on staff's recommendation, and with the, input that maybe we could put flyers in on the billing, so we get a little
Absolutely.
education form, because there's no easy way to do this.
Correct.
Let's just go with what we got and try to make it palatable for everybody involved.
Okay.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to amend sections 13.04 and 13.10 of the Escalon Municipal Code and adopt a resolution adopting a policy regarding the discontinuation of water service. Is there any discussion of the motion on the table?
So I have a question. So if you go with what's proposed, you have January 1st, the bill goes out, the 8th is due. So everything pretty much stays the same as far as when the late fees are applied.
They start the 20th.
But the clock starts for those people that don't comply on January 8th. So the 15-day notices, that's based on 15-day notice issued for disconnections. Why does it come out on the 22nd? why do those go out on the 22nd?
It's 15 days before the disconnect.
That's why.
But if the,
So if we're saying the disconnect is on March
March,
8th,
okay,
then 15 days prior to that date, then we need to do a 15-day notice that they will be disconnected in 15 days.
so if you left it as is, bill on January 1, due on February 1, then they have 60 days from February 1. So
So the bills, then that
So
would be
March.
April 1st.
it would be, the disconnect would be April 1st, so the billing would go out middle of March.
The 15-day notice
Mm-hmm.
would be the middle of March,
So,
which is,
and that's when you're billing?
That's when they're out reading normally. Well, that's during the
Is
even
that-
months. That's the even months.
yeah.
Because I don't think, so you aren't billing in the middle of the month, right? So those
Well,
disconnect
we
notices
are.
would go
We're
out.
in the billing process in the middle of the month. We're doing all of the billing review, and they're reading the meters, and we're checking their reads.
So how does that difference between the 15-day notices going out on February 22nd versus March 15th?
I guess I was looking at it from,
Well, because in February, we're not doing bills.
Well, this is gonna be,
Oh, no, that's not true. That's not true.
It's every 2 months.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I have to think through that process in my head, but yeah.
yeah, because I don't know what,
Right.
you know, the process, you know, here with staff is, but it seems like if it's gonna be the February 22nd or March 15th,
So,
is it really
on-
impacting?
But
is it
on
really
March
overlapping?
15th, we wouldn't be in billing. Because the bills went out on March 1st. So it's in the middle of, it's in April that we start our billing.
So you'd be, so March
So,
15th,
so March 15th would be in our,
you
would
could
not be in billing.
you'd be focused solely on the disconnects, so.
they could be reading.
No. We read in February.
Well, I'm sorry.
This is a mess.
Well, the reason it gets
It's a
missing.
convoluted schedule. It is.
Yeah, I mean, and the worst part about it, that most of this is almost all state in terms of what they wanna do. They, you know, the 15 days, the door hangers, all this stuff like that. So it's already gonna be a convoluted mess.
different language.
We're just trying to get it so that, you know, you're not billing for stuff for January and February, and they're dealing with water that people use in November and December also, which was a January billing, and by now, they've really racked up a bill, because, yeah, I mean, they really racked up a bill if we continue with the current system with the new state regulations, and that's why I'm advocating for this motion as it's been made, personally.
I think
So-
you're creating more work with the accelerated due date. Because then it seems to me that you're doing all the work in the month where you're billing and you're looking at disconnects.
I think the way
She
this,
was
I-
worried
I'm-
about
if I'm
having both.
hearing that.
She was worried about doing billing and shutting off at the same time. That's why she preferred that schedule over the other one.
But I think it's
It's not
just,
that
I
way.
think it's just the opposite.
Well, that's a good
No.
point. Then let's
well,
check
wait,
it out.
well, wait a minute,
Do
February,
here.
she's doing with, no, she'll be doing with, well, yeah, February 2nd, she'll
So
be
that's,
doing with two different
so
problems at the same time.
if we kept it where, Okay,
Do on
but-
the even months.
so if it's January, it's issued January 1st, due February 1st, then it wouldn't be delinquent until April 1st,
Which is when the next bill would be due.
would be going
well.
out.
The notices would be going out in March.
Yeah,
And the
so
door
then you would
hangers.
be sending out your 15-day notices in March.
Right.
That sounds even more confusing. No, I mean,
Do we have to
it's,
figure this out tonight? Like,
you know, it's unavoidable, but yeah, you're right,
Yeah.
you'll be doing three or
We
four
have
things
April
at once
1st.
if you
I
stick
mean,
with
you
the
guys
current
figure it
system.
out. We can't
We
figure it out.
did, well, I
No,
mean,
you'll
we
be doing
thought we
three or
did.
four things at once if you stick with the current system, because then you'll be, oh, gosh.
It's not,
Thanks
we
a
don't,
lot,
this is an
Steve.
example. I mean, let's let them
I think,
figure it out.
I think the problem is that we're overthinking this. We leave it like it is, we implement the new stuff, We try that out. If it doesn't work, then we come back, we can amend the ordinance to advance the due date. But it seems to me that keeping it the way it is the best approach under the current circumstances.
If that's true, then what you said might not be accurate in terms of your,
I was thinking like from the date we bill, so that would be like January 1.
so what you
the
said
2 weeks
earlier was,
after that,
so what you said
that's what
earlier,
I was thinking.
okay, but what you said earlier is not accurate.
Not for that date, no.
So if
It would be
what
no.
Jeff says is accurate, then it'd be fine.
If you keep with the current system, then
Wanna
just go
come
90 days on them, or?
Ask him. What I was gonna
So
do is
you would be
retract
doing
my,
disconnects here at the beginning of
motion,
April.
if that's the case, and restate it.
So we would be doing disconnects and reminder notices for a billing?
If you advance it, right?
If we keep it as it is, no, so January bill would be due February 1st, would be delinquent on April 1st, and March 1st, the bill went out. We're gonna send out a reminder notice on the 2nd, and on the 1st, we're gonna be doing disconnects too. So,
Yeah, because that'll be
all-
from an earlier period.
yeah.
As convoluted as this new system is, because of what the state wants us to do now, it might be the more streamlined of the two systems. That sounds crazy, but it sounds like it's the more streamlined of the two systems. Is there any further discussion on the motion on the table?
Well, we're gonna retract it because what we said.
Would you like to retract?
I'm going to
Okay.
retract it simply because what he pointed out was what she thought was to be, is what it's gonna be.
So it'd be easier under the old system.
That's what it sounds like. Does that make sense to you guys?
I mean, we're gonna be doing disconnects and reminder notices.
What?
No, but at the same time, if we go with our current system.
So.
That's
my-
what you said earlier. That's what I thought you
Well, she
said.
was talking about she was talking about disconnects and doing the billing.
So if we
But it's
move,
really gonna be reminder notices, if we keep it as it is, it's gonna be reminder notices and disconnections.
but if we move it to what the motion was going to, it would help. Okay.
It would separate.
Separate those, all that
processes.
process instead of being overwhelmed.
'Cause, yeah.
You want to stay with your motion?
Yeah, I'll stay with my motion, then we don't overwhelm them.
Are you okay with,
Yes.
staying with the second of the motion? Okay, so, is there any further discussion on the motion on the table? And do we understand which system we're talking about? The motion on the table is favoring the system where January 8th, the bills are due. I mean, that's, yeah, they're due 7, 8 days after they're sent out, basically.
I have more conversation about this. So it seems like you're gonna double up on one thing or another. It's either gonna be
Correct.
notices and disconnects, or it's gonna be billing and disconnects, or all happening at the same time.
So then my retort to that is, do you want to, because either way, you're gonna essentially be giving people, a little over 2 months, 2 months and 8 days, okay, from the billing to disconnection of that service.
I think,
If we go with say with the current system, then you're dealing with an entire 3-month period before you, and that's just, I mean, how much longer do we wanna wait to disconnect their service? Because in the meantime, that water's been used, that money's gone out, that money to produce that water's gone out. So at what point do you say, hey, this is it? And to me, I just don't see a lot of sense in giving them 20 more days to do it.
but you're
What's the
focused on
reward?
them. You're focused on the people that are not
True.
complying, instead of focusing on the people that do comply.
Yeah, and I'm
It's not-
worried about the ones that
Well, I
do,
know.
like, I have a feeling
Because it's
that
not
it's not
gonna
gonna
affect
affect them,
Well,
you know? I really see
I
this
tried
as
to
a matter.
keep it where it wouldn't really affect the way people currently pay
Right.
when they pay on time.
And I think those who are going to be currently paying, again, I mean, I'm just seeing this as nothing more than the grace period. Go home and take a look at how many of your bills, you know, that you pay over the course of a month. If you really only notice, wait, I have 15 days, I have 10 days, nobody notices that. Because you're paying them, you know, within the course of the month, and they're never gonna ding you on that. Your health insurance is one of them, the grace period concept. So most people who are gonna pay within that period are never even gonna notice I think, you know, the difference, when it comes to the actual practice of it. So, is there any further discussion on the motion on the table? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay.
Nay.
Motion passes 4-1. Item number 8, acceptance of response to grand jury case 0917. Tammy?
That's me, yeah. So, we received notice that the 2018 San Joaquin Civil Grand Jury did a follow-up to the 2017-18 San Joaquin County Civil Grand Jury case regarding ethics policy, and they are strictly asking that the cities respond. And part of our findings was that the city of Escalon was to develop a written ethics policy for its elected and appointed officials and its senior staff by June 2019, and we did so on July 15th of 2019. So the response letter attached simply states that we have adopted our ethic policy and forwards a copy to them.
Okay, are there any questions? No? This does need to be an actionable motion.
Moved on staff's recommendation.
Second?
It has been moved and seconded to accept the response to the follow-up report to the 2017-2018 San Joaquin County Civil Grand Jury Case 0917. Is there any discussion on the motion on the table? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Motion passes 5-0. Council communications, Councilmember Crumick.
Thank you, Mayor Swift. I do have a couple questions and comments. I'll keep it quick. Thank you to the sub-attorney today. Thank you for your input and questions and clarifications were helpful, and that was really nice, so thank you.
My pleasure.
Thanks for being here. The community center parking that looks like they're finishing up out there, Justin's not here, but can anybody tell me about that?
Are you referring to the overflow parking?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When's that gonna be done?
I don't know that I have a deadline on that, or a timeline on
It
it.
looks like it's coming together.
Yeah, I think our goal was, of course, for opening day this Saturday for baseball. I'm not quite sure if we will be there.
Okay, thank you. This is another thing, like I said, maybe it's for Justin, but do you remember when that water main broke out in front of the Marval Center, and then we had to dig it out? It's really bumpy.
Yeah,
They're
we've
gonna
been
fix
trying
that
to,
when they fix Jornola.
yeah,
They're gonna repave it or something?
yeah, it should be in the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, well, that's good. It's always so hard for me to listen to these transit reports. I think I had a report of I think the ACE train he was talking about at a thing a while ago, and the lady that was in charge of it or something said it loses like $100 million a year, but they just keep it going, and it's just one of these government things that it just makes me squeamish. And I think about the CEO, Jack Welch, that just died on Sunday. He was the CEO of GE. And his nickname was Neutron Jack, because he would go up and anything that wasn't profitable, he would get rid of it. He would sell it, and he consequently created a very successful company. And they're not doing good anymore. But it was I see these things, and man, if I had the magic button, I would eliminate so many things, and that would be one I would eliminate right away. I also want to apologize to staff for last meeting when we voted very quickly to kind of consent to the tree and the sidewalk issue. I think that we did that without any sort of appeal process, and I think that it has really set a precedent for trees and sidewalks that the city put in moving forward. I think it's going to end up costing the city a lot of money. Tomorrow's a big day. We got Super Tuesday. We got voting happening for important measures. Looking forward to it. I just wanted to make a comment sort of on, I actually made it through the entire Democratic debate, the one in South Carolina. It was like 3 hours long, and it took a lot. It took a lot out of me, but I made it through. And the one thing on there, and I just wanted to make this last comment real quick, is that the people on that stage's typical solution to every problem in society is that the government needs to grow and they need more money. And I am the exact opposite of that. I think the solutions to many problems are less government and less money taken from the private sector. And I think that applies the reason I say that is I think it applies even at a local level, and that's the way I try to vote on things, is to keep that in mind, local, county, state, federal. That being said, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Kramnick. Councilmember Legero.
Nothing, thanks.
Okay. All right, thanks, Councilmember Legero. Councilmember Merkin.
Just one brief thing. I just saw that Modesto got a parks grant for like $50 million to renovate one of their parks. Could we find out where they got that, and is there any more money out there for small cities?
You talking about for Cesar Chavez?
Yes.
Yeah.
Isn't that probably, probably a low-income area, right?
Oh, I'm sure it is.
Where Cesar
Chavez is located in Modesto?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, and that's probably why.
That's probably
they
how
got
it
the
was
grant.
granted,
Okay.
not low.
I know where that
All right.
park's at.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's all I got.
But we could double
Okay.
check.
I did
yeah,
notice
yeah,
the,
we can double check,
Hmm?
but.
On NG, one of their slides, donations to nonprofits.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Just saying.
Councilmember Merkin, thank you very much. Mayor Pro Tem Alves.
Just a couple. First of all, Sanchez Park is still the dumping ground for those who like to clean up their dog do. So I don't know what we can do about that, but it is getting messy over there. The other thing is, it was nice to have some input from Mr. Mark tonight. Mark, good job.
Thanks.
Other than that, that's it.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Alves, and Mark, I'll echo that sentiment. Thank you very much for all your help tonight. Appreciate it. Couple things. Opening day ceremonies is this Saturday. I think, 8 a.m.?
Yes.
Well, if you guys can make it, it's a good time. See all those kids, everybody's fired up, ready to go. I'm sure the Legion's gonna be ready to go. Unless it's raining. Well, yeah.
What are you, a sack of
Fair,
flour?
fair enough, fair enough, fair enough. Our school
Gets a little
district,
sticky.
our typical, our,
Cub Scouts will be there, rain or shine.
excellent, wow, okay.
There it is.
Well, before this gets,
you don't put a UN flag out here in the rain, buddy.
all right, guys, we're all on the same team here, come on, come on. School district meeting, the monthly meeting that we have with, city staff, school board members, school staff. The school board, members of the school board, they have had 2 school board members at every single meeting. And they like doing these, the staff likes doing these, the school staff likes doing these. Again, I'm gonna encourage you gentlemen to think about coming to this next meeting, which won't be this Thursday morning at 8. It'll be the following Thursday morning at 8. It's worth it. The communication that we have, I think, has been invaluable. And so, yeah, that'd be great. You can make it, Councilmember Cromwell, that'd be great. 8 a.m., 8 a.m.
It'll be March 12th, 8 a.m.
And I just do have one question regarding the parking lot to bounce off of what Councilmember Cromwell was talking about. I noticed that looks like there might be a solid fence that would prohibit families to go through the man gates to the rookie field and the T-ball field. And it looks like the main way they could get from that parking lot would be going through the driving area that cars would be going through in front of the Public Works building. And therefore, they would enter onto the field through the means that they normally enter, walking in between the T-ball teams and stuff like that. Is that how I'm seeing it, or is there going to be?
I can't answer that. I
Okay.
don't know.
Maybe we'll follow up tomorrow and ask about
Yeah.
that. Just the way it looks like it's gonna be solid, and,
I thought there was a man gate that was down farther.
where there are 2 man gates in the field, but it looks like there's gonna be a fence going up at the end of the parking lot to prohibit people from
Well,
going through.
that it's a gate.
Will there be a gate there?
It's a gate.
Okay.
Yeah.
And will it be open
Yeah.
during this? Oh, yeah.
So the goal is that you would enter in from the existing parking lot. There'll be a sign that indicates the overflow that would drive over to
Sure.
the overflow parking lot. So those gates would be open.
The gate, so in other words, a man gate will be open from that
No,
parking lot?
gates for cars.
Well, yeah, But I mean, will there be man gate, or will families and children have to go right in the same lane that the cars are going into that parking lot?
Well, I think there's a man gate down farther.
There is, but it looks like there's gonna be a fence going up that might prohibit people from going through the man gate. We'll talk about that tomorrow.
Yeah, I don't know the
Yeah, you're
logistics,
saying
so
that,
I'll have to
yeah.
look.
Okay, appreciate it. On that note, want to thank everybody who came tonight and who stayed also. Long night, but a lot of good was done. So thank you very much for coming to the council meeting. I declare this meeting adjourned.